Welcome to the Advanced Premiere Pro for Everyone course. My name is Dave Bode for Envato, and in this course, you will learn techniques to help you work faster and create projects that look and sound great. Even though the lessons in this course cover more advanced subjects, anyone who has used Premiere before should be able to follow along without any trouble. Most of the assets that you will see in this course come from Envato Elements. With Envato Elements, you get access to millions, yes, millions, of creative digital assets for one low price. I'm talking about stock footage, motion graphics templates, music, photos, vector graphics, fonts, sound effects, After Effects templates, and so much more. A single subscription gives you access to everything you need to create great projects. See for yourself at elements.envato.com. This course starts with edit techniques like source patching and track targeting, track lock, sync lock, 3-point and 4-point edits, slow motion, speed ramps, and more. None of those techniques sound terribly exciting. It's not lightsabers or explosions or close-up shots of kittens. But knowing how those things work will save you a lot of headaches and help you to edit faster. After that, you will learn how to work with raw footage, log footage, lookup tables or LUTs, how to use Colorchecker cards, and how to color match shots. You will also learn how to work with audio by fixing audio drift, using multiple compressors, master bus effects, and loudness normalization. Finally, there's a section that I call Edit Enhancers, where you will learn about using multiple monitors in Premiere, third-party video effects, motion graphics templates, post-production camera moves, and creative edits using multi-box and split screens and techniques for editing to the beat of the music faster than you ever thought possible. To get started, check out the next section, where you are going to learn about advanced edit techniques. In this lesson, you're going to learn about track targeting and source patching. So, I'm working on a montage here with clips that I found on Envato Elements and a really great music track that I found on Envato Elements here. I'm going to play you just a second of this. I said it was just a second. Well, that was a couple of seconds. But I'm going to be using these clips in the next few lessons. So I'm going to mute my music track here so it remains quiet while I'm scrubbing on the timeline. And let's jump into track targeting. So track targeting controls things like copy-paste, match frame, and navigation commands. Now you may have noticed when you create a new sequence or when you're editing that some of these video tracks and audio tracks over here sometimes are highlighted blue in this column right here. And if you mouse over, it'll tell you that the little switch here toggles the track targeting for this track, which is a mouthful. But that controls things like copy and paste. So let's talk about copy and paste. If I take a clip down here and I copy it, let's say I want to paste it right here in this gap, you can see that it pasted on video track 1. Even though I have video track 1, 2, and 3 targeted. And that's because when you paste things, it pastes to the lowest track that has been targeted. So in this case, that would be video 1. However, if I deselect that and I paste it again, you'll see that it pastes to video 2. Now, usually if you want to do something more precise, what you would probably do is just toggle the track targeting for the track that you wanted to paste that particular clip to. So let's say I wanted to do maybe a split screen right here, and I want that clip to be on video 2. Because video 2 is the only one targeted, that's the only thing that I need to worry about. So that's usually what I do when I am copying and pasting, is if I'm copying and pasting video or audio, I will make sure that the tracks are targeted where I want those clips to be pasted. So that covers copy and paste. Now, another thing that track targeting affects is match frame. So if you want to find this source clip right here and bring it up in the source monitor, you can hit F on the keyboard, and that will do what's called a match frame, and it will bring up this source clip. And you'll see it has an in and an out, but unlike when you double click the clip in the timeline, when you hit F, this brings up the source clip. So it essentially opens it up like you would from the project panel, meaning if we adjust the in and the out times, it's not going to adjust the in and the out here in our sequence. And that's handy for a lot of different uses. And how that affects match frame is when you're scrubbing along here in the timeline, you'll see that my clips here are being selected as I scrub. And that's because I have video 1, video 2, and video 3 all targeted. And when I come over here, I have a stack of 3 and even 4 clips right here. And so if I hit F on the keyboard, even though there are 4 clips stacked here, the one that is selected, which is determined by the track targeting, is the one that shows up in the source monitor. Track targeting also affects navigation commands. So when you press up and down on the keyboard, the CTI will jump to the next edit point on the tracks that have been targeted. For example, if I only target video 3 and I press up, this is going to jump to the beginning of the sequence, but then when I press down, the CTI is going to jump to this clip because that's the only track that has been targeted. Likewise, if I do it on video 2, it's going to jump to the only clips that are on the video 2 layer. But if I wanted to jump to all of the edit points, what I would do is just select all of the tracks or target all the tracks by holding Shift and then clicking. And now when I press up and down, you can see that it will jump. Well, it looks like I have a bit of a mismatch there. It looks like that one is 1 frame off, which is why the CTI is jumping like that, but you can see it's jumping to all of the edit points. And it works the same for audio as well. Now I only have 1 audio clip here, but if I duplicate this and slide it down and then press up and down, you can see it's not going to jump to this edit point right here or here because that track has not been targeted. But if I target it, now it will jump to that edit point. And that is very handy to know. So that is track targeting. Let's talk about source patching. This is another thing that probably frustrated you at one point, but I'm going to sort it out right now. So when you have clips that you are inserting into your projects and you bring them up in the source monitor, and maybe you want to use an insert or an overwrite, those tracks get patched in wherever you have source patching enabled. So this button over here selects where that clip will be patched to. And you can see right now it says video 1. And the fact that it's labeled video 1 is a little bit confusing, but I'm going to show you why it's labeled video 1 in a second. So let's say I wanted to patch that to video 2 right here. So I'm going to select the source patch for this video to be right here on track video 2. Now the reason why that's confusing is because this says video 1, and that's because this particular clip has 1 video track. And you don't see any options down here for audio because this clip right here doesn't have any audio. But if it did, you would see an option to select the source patching or deselect it for this particular clip. So if I do an overwrite edit, right here, you can see it gets patched in right there. So I'm going to look in the project panel here and I'm going to find another clip with audio and video. And now you can see that I have a V1 for the video track and an A1 for the audio track here. Now, if you have a video clip that has more than 1 audio track, like you might find with particular cameras that shoot in more than 2-track audio, there are some cameras that can shoot maybe 4 mono tracks or 2 stereo tracks or even 6 or more audio tracks, you will see more options here for source patching. You'll see A1, A2, A3, etc. And so now with this clip right here, when I want to patch that in, I want to make sure that I have my audio and my video source patching set properly because I don't want to overwrite my music. So when I have my clip selected here and I do an overwrite, you can see it gets patched in appropriately rather than like this, where it's going to patch in over my audio. So I hope that makes sense. But let's say I didn't want the audio and I only wanted the video. Well, I can just disable the audio for this patching right here. And now when I patch this in and I do an overwrite, you can see it only does the video. And the same thing for audio. Let's say I just want some audio and I'll scrub to a spot that actually has audio. So right here. And I patch that in. Well, I want that to patch in down here. And then when I hit the period key, there's my audio. It's quite faint, but that's okay. I think you see what's going on here. I know for me, a lot of times I'll be working with footage and I don't need any of the audio, but a bunch of clips have audio. It could be drone footage and I don't need any of the drone audio. It's more or less useless. So knowing how source patching works is very handy like that. Now I'm going to show you one more thing with source patching, which is a little more of an obscure use case. And that is when you are patching in a sequence. So I have a sequence down here called multi. Now this sequence is not anything special. I made it as quickly as possible, but it's just for demonstration purposes. You can see that I have 4 video tracks and 3 audio tracks. Now normally, if I was to patch this in to my project, you're going to see this. You're going to see 1 video track for source patching and 1 audio track. And I'm going to jump to the end of my sequence here so I don't keep overwriting things. So I'm going to press the period key here, and you can see that's what got patched in. However, there's a switch here in the timeline, which will toggle back and forth between patching in sequences as nests, which is 1 video track and 1 audio track, or individual clips. So if I turn this off, now what you'll see is I have more options for source patching. I have all the video tracks right here and all of the audio tracks. So when I patch in, it's going to patch all of those video and all those audio tracks. I also want to show you that you don't have to patch all of them in, so you can patch individual tracks in, and you can also reorder how they're patched in. So right now you can see it's video 1, 2, 3, and 4, but the audio tracks are reversed. But I can easily go back to 1, 2, 3 by clicking and dragging. And now when I patch it in, you'll see that it patches that way. But just to show you the difference, I'm going to revert to the other way and then patch that in. And you can see that it did reverse or reorder how those were stacked up there. The final thing that I want to show you is you can do something called a silent patch. Now you do that by alt-clicking, and what a silent patch does is it patches in a blank spot in your sequence. So I'm going to actually do that down here on video 1 so that you can see. I'm going to toggle off the audio. And now when I patch this clip in with period, it's going to patch in the exact space that I set with the in and the out point here for this clip. And it's going to overwrite that with nothing. Now, I wanted to show you that because that is a feature. However, it's not something that I've ever come across in any of my edits. But I don't know, maybe you will need to do something just like that. You know, maybe you're doing something where you need a lot of, I don't know, rhythmical breaks, and it's easiest to do one of these silent patches by alt-clicking the source patching and getting this little black highlight here. And maybe you'll find a use for that. I don't know. I have not found a use for that, but now you know, and knowing is half the battle. That's all for source patching and track targeting. Coming up in the next lesson, you're going to learn about track lock and sync lock. In this lesson, you're going to learn about sync lock and track lock. First, let's talk about track lock. A lot of times when you are editing something, you need to lock something. Let's say, for example, I have my music set just right. It's a certain length. The length can't change, and I don't want to mess with it. If I do nothing to my project here, and I continue editing, maybe I'll do a ripple here, and maybe I'll do a ripple here, just a little bit, because I need these shots to be a little bit longer to align with the music. But as you see down here, now I have screwed up my music because I have a gap here. Because by default, sync lock is enabled for all tracks. That's what this toggle is right here. This is a toggle for sync lock. and by default, all your tracks are unlocked. It would be pretty annoying if you made a new sequence and everything was locked. So because sync lock is enabled and track lock is disabled, this is what happens. You get gaps. However, let's say I didn't want my music track to move at all. One way that you could go about that is to just lock the track. Now, when you lock a track, whether it's video or audio, you can't do anything to it. It is completely frozen. You can't unmute it. You can't select anything on here. You can't add any effects. You can't add keyframes. For audio clips, you can't do anything to the track audio, meaning you can't add any effects in the audio track mixer, and you can't adjust the fader level here or the track volume level. The entire thing is locked. So this can be very handy because now I can go and edit however I want here. I can ripple, I can insert. Everything that hasn't been locked will still move normally, but this audio doesn't move. Very handy. However, there's another way to lock this in position, but still allow you to select the clips and make some adjustments, and that is sync lock. Now, by default, sync lock is enabled on all the tracks, which is normally what you would want. And I'll show you why in just a second. But if I disable sync lock for this audio track, now if I do a ripple edit, you'll see that it basically behaves exactly the same as when the track was locked. However, I can still select these clips. I can adjust the track volume here in the audio track mixer. I can add effects in the audio track mixer. I can add effects over here in effects controls and modify and add keyframes. But it doesn't move when I am doing ripples or inserts. If I grab this clip right here and I do an insert, the audio doesn't move. So in that way, it's similar to track lock, but I can still access the clips. And I can still move them if I wanted. Disabling sync lock doesn't mean that everything is locked in time. It just sort of protects this from being moved when you are editing other stuff on your timeline. Now, the one area where you want to watch out with using sync lock is when you are using footage that has dialogue or synced audio to it, essentially. So let's say, for example, I pull down this clip right here, and I'm just going to pull down a couple of these real quick. No idea what my buddy Nate here is saying, but that is unimportant. Just going to normalize there so you can see the waveforms there. So let's say I have this video here up on video layer 2 or video track 2. Audio's on audio track 1. And I disable sync lock on video track 2. And then I do a ripple edit down here on video track 1. Look at what happens. This becomes out of sync. And if I play this...
And the book is really about what happens to them when they go through this.
It's totally wrong now, and it's totally screwed up. And this clip here, all of these clips are still linked together, meaning the audio is still linked to the video. However, the synchronization is now all goofed up. And that's why we have these little flags here. It's showing you that this is 2 seconds and 16 frames out of sync. So when you're using sync lock, you want to watch out for anything that has audio and video linked together or synced together, because you don't always have audio and video synced together. For example, sometimes what I will do is use audio and video clips that are synced, but then at some point I will unlink them by selecting them and then choosing unlink. So if I select all of these and then I choose unlink, they're still synced, but they're no longer linked, meaning that I can move the video. And sometimes I do this to do certain effects or whatever. You know, maybe I need to have this video play, but paste in a different word because whoever was speaking bumbled a word or something. So I paste in a word right here. In general, these items are synced, but they're not linked. And so this can present another hazard, because if I were to do the same thing and turn off sync lock here and then do something like a ripple, now these are not in sync anymore, but I have the added issue of it doesn't tell me that because the clips are not linked. So before, when they were linked together, like this, and I did that same operation, it shows me that they are out of sync. But when they are not linked, by the way, that keyboard shortcut that I'm using is Control L, and I do the same thing, it doesn't show me the sync error there. So you just want to watch out when you use sync lock or when you disable it, because like I said before, it is enabled by default. But when you disable it because you need things to stay put, watch out for your clips that are synced to audio. That about wraps it up for track lock and sync lock. Coming up in the next lesson, you're going to learn about 3-point and 4-point edits. In this lesson, you will learn about 3- and 4-point edits. 3- and 4-point editing sounds really complicated, but it's actually really simple. And it has to do with putting a clip in a spot in the timeline in a precise way. So let's say I wanted to get a clip here in this gap right here. I have this nice build-up here happening in my music. And I need a dope-looking shot for this blank spot here. So let me look in my assets. I'm going to double-click on my footage here, and maybe I'll put this full screen here. I think there's a really awesome helicopter clip in here. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Yes, let's take a look at this up in the source monitor. So we have this huge helo coming in, and the rotor wash hits the camera. He's like, whoa, dude. I like it. It's cool. Great shot. So how do we get that clip into this gap here? I'm going to mute my audio again. I want to select maybe this area right here because I want that rotor wash bit in there. Well, if I just patch in the video, and I know I want it to go into video 1, let's see, I will select my clip here and then do an overwrite. Okay, there we go. I got it in there. Perfect. However, it's not filling the gap. And this is where 3- and 4-point edit comes in to help you out. So 3- and 4-point edit means we're going to have to set some points. That's where the point comes in 3- and 4-point edit. And the first 2 points are going to be in the timeline. So we need to select an in and an out point because that's where we want to insert our footage. So I'm going to select an in point right here and an out point right here. You can see that just selects this bit right here. If I left the CTI right here and I pressed O, it's actually going to select 1 frame to the right, and I don't want to do that. I want it right here. This is the gap that I want to fill. So I have 1 point here, an in point, and an out point. That's 2 of my 3 points. Now right here, if I clear my out point and I have an in point, that is the 3rd point of my 3-point edit. So I have 1, 2, 3 points. So basically what I'm telling Premiere is, I want you to fill this gap right here, and I want you to do it starting right here. So now if I do an overwrite, it's going to fill that gap for me. And anything after my out point in my timeline just gets edited off. I can also just set an out point. Let's say, I don't know where this clip begins, but I know I want it to end there. So I'm going to clear my in point, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to add it to the timeline here. Boom. I got my clip in there. Perfect. And it'll just set the in point for however that lines up right here in the timeline. So I'm going to undo that one more time. That's a 3-point edit. We have 3 points of information, an in and an out point in the timeline. And in my clip, you have either an in point or an out point. Now, a 4-point edit is even more precise because now we're saying, okay, I want you to fill this gap with an in and an out, and I want you to use this in and out. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 points. And now when I hit overwrite, I'm going to get a little pop-up here that says the source is shorter than the destination. And then we have some options on what you want to do. So you can change the clip speed to fill. So because this is shorter, if I choose this option, what's going to happen is it's just going to do this clip in slow motion. I set that to frame size so you can see. That's one option. If I do this again, I have these other options as well. I can ignore the source in point. I can ignore the source out point, ignore the sequence in point, or ignore the sequence out point. And I can choose an option so that whichever I choose will always be the choice. So that's basically a 3 or 4 point edit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ignore the in point, which essentially makes it a 3-point edit. But I think you understand the idea, because sometimes you just won't have enough footage to fill and you need to maybe make one of those other options there. But that's basically all there is to a 3 and a 4 point edit. You're just setting an in and an out in the timeline, and you're setting an in or an out with a 3-point edit. And with a 4-point edit, you're setting an in and an out. And then if you haven't selected the right length of footage, which you're almost certainly not going to do, Premiere is going to give you some options on how to handle that. So there you have it, 3 and 4-point edits. Coming up in the next lesson, you're going to learn about dynamic trimming. In this lesson, you will learn about dynamic trimming. Dynamic trimming is one of many ways that you can approach trimming your clips inside of Premiere Pro. I have a really basic sequence set up here with 2 clips, and I want to show you how dynamic trimming works. So to do that, I'm going to enter trim mode by hitting the keyboard shortcut, Shift-T on the keyboard. You can also come up to the menu and go to Sequence, and then Trim Edit. When you're in trim mode, you can use the up and down arrows to cycle to and from the next edit point. And just like you learned in the last lesson, you can use track targeting to make sure that it's jumping to the next edit point that you want based on the tracks that are targeted. So once you have the trim mode pulled up here, I'm just going to expand this and make it a little bigger. If you use J, K, and L on the keyboard, what you can do is you can play both clips at the same time. And when you stop playback, the edit will be performed. Now, you can do a number of different edits like this. Right now, it's going to do a rolling edit. And you can tell that because it's playing both clips, because in a rolling edit, you are moving the edit point of both clips, the out point of the clip on the left and the in point of the clip on the right. So if I play backwards and then I press K to stop, so that was J to play backwards or rewind and then K to stop, you can see that the edit point moved down here in the timeline. And you can tell that this is going to do a rolling edit because the blue highlight is around both clips and it's playing both clips. And additionally, the edit point is red. So let's say you didn't want to do a rolling edit and you wanted to do a ripple edit. Well, if you click on the left clip here, you'll see that the edit point turns yellow and we only have a highlight on the leftmost clip here. And this is going to do a ripple out, meaning that it's going to perform a ripple trim to the out point of this clip on the left. So now if I play backwards and I stop using J and K on the keyboard, you can see that is rippling down here in the timeline. Similarly, if I click on the right and I play forward and I press stop using L to play forward and K to stop, that's going to perform a ripple trim exactly like if I were to just click and drag down here in the timeline. However, this gives you a nicer sort of way to do that same sort of thing. And that's basically it. Again, to get into trim mode, it's Shift-T on the keyboard, and you can use the up and down arrows to navigate to get to the trim that you want to do. Then you can use J, K, and L. And by default, for me, that is going to be a rolling edit. But if I wanted to do a ripple, I would just click over here. And now I could ripple this back, ripple this forward, and so on. So let me show you how I would actually do this if I was editing these two clips together. So let's say I want to get this clip to the point where this person, this skier here, is just about to land. So I'm going to use ripple on the left side here to maybe get it right about here. And then over here on the right, I'm going to click and I'm going to play. And I think I need to play backwards. And I want to grab the spot, right about here when they're just about to land. So if I press spacebar, what that should do is loop that point that I just made. Let's check that out. So here we go. Here's the first clip and the second clip. And then it should loop back and play that again so that I can make sure that that is correct. I hit spacebar again. And now I can make some refinements from there. And that's basically it. Dynamic trimming is not some secret art. It's really pretty simple. It's not too much different than just using the regular trim tools that you have in Premiere. So in my case, there's an option in Preferences to make it so that the default trim tool is the ripple tool. And I believe if you haven't changed that option, the default will be the regular trim tool like this. But if I was doing a ripple, I could do the same sort of thing like this. It's just a little bit more clunky to do it by clicking and dragging, although usually that's what I do. And the reason why it's a little more clunky is because I normally have snap enabled. And so if the playhead is anywhere near here or you have other items in the timeline, what'll happen when you try and perform this ripple is that it will try and snap to other items. And that makes getting the precise point kind of annoying. Sometimes it just won't get to the right point. You can see right here at this zoom level, moving back and forth like a pixel on my mouse jumps 3 frames. And I can't get any more granularity like this unless I turn off snap by pressing S on the keyboard. And now I can get to those other frames if I move my mouse really, really slow. Okay, so that's dynamic trimming. But while I have you here, I'm going to show you another way to trim clips, which you may have stumbled on by accident and then had to undo because you didn't know exactly what happened. So there are 2 keyboard shortcuts that I want to tell you about. One of them is Q and the other is W. And they have to do with trimming, which is why I'm bringing them up now. So what Q does, Q takes the previous edit point, so the edit point to the left of the playhead or the CTI, and edits that to the playhead. So this edit point right here, when I press Q, is going to edit right here. It's going to ripple that. So watch what happens when I press Q. Okay? It's a very quick way to perform ripple edits. Similarly, W takes the next edit point and ripples that to the playhead, just like that. So this can be useful if you have a bunch of footage that doesn't have very precise in and out points on your timeline, and you're scrubbing along or you're playing your footage, so you can actually do this while you're playing, and then you can press W or Q to make edits. So let's say you were playing this clip right here, and you got to this point, you said, okay, I don't need anything after this. This is where I want to cut. You don't need to go into dynamic trim or do anything fancy. You can just press W on your keyboard. Similarly, let's say I had more of this clip here like this, and you're playing along in your timeline. You say, okay, yeah, this is actually where I want to cut this to. So I'm going to press Q, and that's going to ripple all of this like that. And now I have this edit right here. Boom. Perfect. It's another fast way it's kind of similar to dynamic trimming, but I don't think Adobe calls that dynamic trimming. However, it works in a similar way. We're playing back the footage, and you can perform an edit by pressing W and Q. It's not quite as refined, but it's another fast way to make edits. That's it for this lesson. Coming up next, you're going to learn how to automate to sequence. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to automate to sequence. So automate to sequence is really pretty simple, and I'm going to walk you through it in this lesson. To start, I'm going to navigate to some of my footage here. I'm going to double click to open up this footage bin. And I'm going to take a look at a couple of these shots. In fact, I really don't need to be too fussy about this. You can be more precise when you are editing, but essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to select some clips here. These look good, like this helicopter clip, and like this eye clip right here. And then if I click this button down here that says Automate to Sequence, I'm going to get a nice little pop-up here, and I have a bunch of options on how Premiere is going to take all of these clips and insert them into a sequence. If we look at the top here, we have a couple of options. So we have sort order or selection order. I'm going to leave it on selection order, which is the order that I just selected those clips. And I would think that's probably what you're going to want to do as well. And then in terms of placement, we have two options. We have sequentially or at unnumbered markers. And I'm going to show you in an upcoming lesson how you can use markers to create a really fast edit to music. But for now, I'm just going to leave it set to sequentially. The method is going to be overwrite edit, although we could choose insert, clip overlap. We have frames or seconds. If we had stills, we can specify the number of frames for those. We can apply default audio or video transitions, and we have options for ignoring audio or video. I don't think any of the clips that I had contained any audio, so my only option is to ignore video, and that doesn't seem like a good option, so I'm not going to do that. And I'm just going to click OK. I'm going to hit tilde here to come out of full screen for that footage bin, and over here in my sequence, it's basically put together that edit for me. So if I had spent time setting in and out points here, I'd have something really pretty nice. I think the only thing that I need to do is select all of these and then choose set to frame size, because this is a 1080 comp and some of this footage is either Ultra HD or 4K. Obviously, some of these in and out points don't really work because I sort of selected these clips at random, but you can see if you do take time to set in and out points, you can very quickly build and edit, and then you have all kinds of options for getting that into a sequence very quickly. And that's automate to sequence. Coming up in the next lesson, you are going to learn about slow motion. In this lesson, you are going to learn about slow motion. In the previous few lessons, you will have seen more of this ski action footage here, and you will have noticed that some of it is playing back in slow motion, some of it's playing back at normal speed, and in this lesson, I'm going to show you why that is, and I'm also going to show you how you can take conventional normal frame rate footage, 24, 25, 30 frame per second footage, and slow it down, in which settings you need to check to make it look nice. But first, I want to show you this edit so you can check out where I'm at. All right, I think that's looking pretty nice, if I do say so myself. And I did just say so that's the way it's going to be. I'm going to mute my audio again, and let's check out some of these clips. So let's take this clip for example, and I'll play it back. You can see that this is clearly playing back in slow motion, the way those particles and water droplets come off this ski boot buckle is not happening in real time. By the way, the reason the footage looked a little grainy in the preview is because I turned on proxies so that it played back nice and smoothly. If I turn off proxies, this footage does look very, very good. So let's check out what is going on with this particular clip. I'm going to right-click on this clip and choose Reveal in Project. And that'll pull it up over here in the Project panel. And you can see that I have a frame rate of 23.976. which means that this frame rate matches my sequence frame rate. And if I come up here to sequence settings, you can see that the time base for the sequence, or the frame rate for the sequence, is 23.976. So my footage is not high frame rate, but it's playing back and it looks like slow motion footage. This was done in one of probably two ways. Either the footage was captured on a camera in high frame rate, and then the camera wrote a video file that was a conventional frame rate, like 23.976. And that's pretty common. Another possibility is that this footage was captured at a high frame rate. The camera wrote a high frame rate video file, and then whoever uploaded this to Envato Elements stretched it out and then encoded it before it got uploaded, such that when you played the video file back, it wasn't high frame rate anymore. It was 23.976, but it played back slowly. And I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. So we have a collection of those, and sometimes on stock sites, you'll find footage that's a normal frame rate, and you'll find slow motion footage, and sometimes you'll find high frame rate footage. So let's look at a couple of examples of other clips that I have here. If I look in my project, here we go. I have at least one clip that is a high frame rate clip. Let me bring that out here on the timeline so you can see what's going on. So this clip is 60 frames a second. I don't know if you saw that over here in the project panel, 60 frames a second, which means that this clip has more frames in it than what my sequence is set to. And if I play it back, it's going to play back at regular speed. I know it seems like this person is going really, really fast, but actually it's in real time. And what this means is I can grab the rate stretch tool, which is R on the keyboard, and I can take the end of this clip and just stretch it out. And if I zoom in here, you'll see that's about 40% speed is when I drop that down to. And now when I play that back, it's going to play back nice and slow, and it doesn't look jittery at all. And the reason it doesn't look jittery is because this was already high frame rate. And when I stretched it out, those extra frames sort of filled in the gaps, where if I took conventional footage and stretched that out, Premiere would have to repeat frames in order to fill all of the time. In fact, if I go frame by frame, you'll see that there's probably not going to be any repeated frames. Now, that's one way to take high frame rate footage and make it play back slow in a timeline. It's not a very precise way. For example, if I stretched this out even more to like 20%, now we'd probably be to the point where you're going to see a repeated frame every once in a while. But it's certainly a totally fine way to do it and just kind of eyeball the speed or the length. You know, sometimes it's a matter of you have a certain clip that needs to fill a certain gap, and so it doesn't really matter what it looks like. That clip has to go there. I've been there more times than I can count. Another way to handle slowing this down is to make a copy of this clip. So I'm just going to duplicate this clip with the keyboard shortcut. I know that the keyboard shortcut that popped up there said Control-Shift ? But it's actually Control-Shift /. I'm not really sure why it does that, but that's what it did. So here you see I have my copy of the clip, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click on the clip and go up to Modify, Interpret Footage. Under the frame rate option here, I'm going to say Assume this frame rate and type in 23.976, which is the frame rate of my sequence, and click OK. And it's going to stretch the clip out such that when I play this back, it plays back perfectly with no repeated frames, and I don't have to guess to know if that is going to happen at all. It's not like repeated frames are a huge deal, because they're certainly not, but I think a lot of times you may prefer not to have them, because I think they are pretty detectable by the human eye. So that's dealing with high frame rate footage, and 60 frames a second is not even really high frame rate footage these days. A lot of cameras can shoot 120 and even up to 240, and certainly some specialized cameras can shoot even higher than that. But let's take a look at another piece of footage here That is conventional frame rate. So this is going to be around 25 frames a second. Yep, here it is right here. A lot of the clips that I have are actually slow motion. So this is one of the few that I have that is regular speed. I'm just going to set this to frame size because this is an Ultra HD clip. And let's just take a look at what this looks like. So it looks to me like this is regular speed. It's not slow motion. It's 25 frames a second. That's how it was acquired. That's how the file was written. And this is basically happening in real time. So what happens if I take this and I stretch this out? So I just grab the rate stretch tool. I know I changed tools pretty quickly, but I grabbed the rate stretch tool just like I did before, and I stretched it out just like I did before. And let's take a look at what it looks like. And this is about 40% as well. I'm going to scrub forward, or I'll do a slide edit here so we can see kind of more of the motion. What you'll see is this looks choppy. I mean, that's pretty plain for anyone, even when this gets encoded and compressed. That looks choppy. And the reason it looks choppy, if we go frame by frame, is it's repeating frames. So there's one new frame, and then we'll go another frame. That's a repeated frame. There's a new frame, repeat, repeat. So that's 2 repeated frames. And it's basically cycling between 1 repeated frame and then 2 repeated frames to fill in all the gaps. That to me does not look so hot, but there are some options in Premiere to make that look better. So I'm going to slip edit again to a spot here. Okay, so I'm going to get this to right about here where we can see a good amount of movement. And I'm going to show you the 2 other options that you have for these type of clips. So I'm going to duplicate that and then duplicate that again. And for this, I'm going to turn off proxies. And then on this clip right here, I'm going to show you one option for time interpolation. And this is basically how Premiere is handling making up for the extra frames. By default, it's set to frame sampling, which does not look great. But usually on normal footage, you can get away with this up to like maybe 80% speed. Anything past that, and you're going to see repeated frames, is going to be pretty obvious. The next option, which I don't think is very good, but it does work sometimes, is frame blending. Now you can kind of see what it did in the preview here. It doesn't play back without pre-rendering it. So you can see when it stops what it's sort of doing, but when you play it, it basically reverts back to frame sampling. At least that's my understanding. But I'll show you what it looks like in just a second. And we're going to compare all 3 of these. So this is going to be frame sampling, this one's going to be frame blending, and this one is going to be the one that you normally should use, and that is optical flow. Now, optical flow looks fantastic when it works and looks like a hot mess when it does not work. What optical flow does is it analyzes the pixels in the video frame to frame and then calculates their vector or their motion. So it'll say, okay, this little pixel from here to the next frame moved this much. So when it gets stretched out, it's going to take those pixels and move them somewhere in between. And when it works, it is absolutely fantastic. But it doesn't always work all that well. And if I play this, you're not going to see anything because this needs to be rendered. Now that's pretty easy to do. I'm just going to set an in point and an out point here. And then I'm going to come up to sequence and then choose render in to out. And this is basically going to render all of these clips so that you can actually see what's happening. So everything was rendered and it's playing back the rendered files now. And again, this is frame sampling. This one is frame blending, and this one is optical flow. And check it out. So you can clearly see that's frame blending. It looks like a mess. And then check out optical flow. That looks really pretty good. Let me go back there. We'll check that out again. In fact, I'm going to bring up the loop. Here's a little bonus here. There's a loop button here we can pull down, and I'm going to turn on loop, and that should loop from in to out point. That's frame sampling, chop, chop, chop. Frame blending is a little bit better than frame sampling, but it does look like kind of a mess. And then this, for the most part, looks pretty darn smooth. It's not perfect, and like I said, optical flow doesn't work with everything. In fact, I saw an error right here. If you were to watch this one time, I'm not even sure you would have seen it. But if we go back just a little bit, I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So here's the frame blending, and you can clearly see that it's frame blending. I don't like that. I think it looks terrible. And then here is the optical flow. And if you look right here, it gets confused with this patch of pixels. Burp, or maybe it was down here. You can see they kind of, they do some weird transformations there. So sometimes this works well, sometimes it doesn't. It kind of looks like an avalanche is actually happening there, which is, I guess, extra exciting for this particular clip. Those are your options for slowing down footage. Now, certainly, if I slowed it down less, optical flow would look better. Frame blending might look a little bit better, but I generally think that frame blending is pretty much useless in every single case. But if I put these down to 75 or even 60%, maybe even 50%, optical flow is probably going to do a little bit better. Again, it doesn't work all the time, and you can't really see what it's going to do until you do a render. I would not suggest putting optical flow on without doing that render to in and out before you export, because then what will happen is you export it, and that may take some time depending on your project, and then you'll see optical flow didn't work, and you're going to have to go back and make adjustments. So just set an in and out point, render to in and out, and then you'll see what that's going to look like. This is not going to mess up your final export or anything like that. It's just a way for you to be able to see what optical flow is doing. Well, that pretty much covers slow motion. Coming up in the next lesson, you're going to learn about speed ramps. In this lesson, you are going to learn about speed ramps. In the last lesson, you learned about slow motion footage, how to take high frame rate footage and slow it down, how to take conventional footage and slow it down, and what options you want to look for so that it can look a little bit smoother. And now we're going to look at speed ramps. So unlike taking regular footage or high frame rate footage and slowing it down to just one speed, a speed ramp alters the speed over time. So we might start fast and go slow. We might start slow and go fast, that sort of thing. And you saw this if you've been following along in the edit. This shot right here is a speed ramp. It starts off really fast and then rolls down to slow at the end. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. I'm going to take this footage and drop it into a new sequence here. So if I right-click on this clip, at the very bottom of this menu, I have an option to show clip keyframes. And by default, this is set to opacity. But what I'm looking for is time remap speed. I'm going to zoom up here, make this a little bigger so you can see what's going on. In fact, I'm just going to delete all the extra tracks. There we go, nice and clean. So if I click this line up, we're going to increase the speed of the clip and subsequently change the length of the clip. You can see the whole clip got shorter. If I pull this down, we're going to make the clip much, much longer. But the real magic in speed ramps comes from the keyframes. So if I control click here, now I have a keyframe. So before this keyframe, I can make the clip very, very fast. Maybe I'll alt drag this down a little bit so I can get a really drastic difference here. So we'll push this up to absurd values. Maybe, I don't know, something like that. Maybe move this a little bit shorter. Oh, that was too much. One of the things with speed ramps is you can move this a little, and because before this keyframe is set to like almost 2000% speed, if you move it too much, the end point of the clip is going to come right up to the keyframe. So it is a little bit fiddly in that regard, but let's play what I've done so far. Okay, pretty good, pretty good. I can make this a lot faster. I think that'll be better. And you can go absurdly fast above 10,000%. Very cool. That looks awesome. Let me undo that. Again, it's control click to add a keyframe. And then if you alt click and drag, you can move it down the timeline to reposition it. You can also click and drag to split the keyframe. Now, I'm going to make this a little bit slower here and adjust this in so you can see this a little bit better. And now what we have is a bit of a transition. So before it was basically a hard edge transition. We were going fast, and then the next frame we were going slow. And now what we have is we're going fast, and then we're going to slowly transition to our normal frame rate down here at like 100% or close enough. And it's happening over this period of time right here. So if I make this bigger, the clip is going to get shorter because over the transition period, more of these frames are being played back faster. And in fact, that's how I did the speed ramp when I used the clip, is I did something like this, and the whole thing was basically a speed ramp where we started very, very quickly and went just like this. But we have some other options here with these keyframes. For one, it doesn't have to be a linear transition. If you click and drag, we can make this a little bit more curvy. So now it's more of a Bezier type transition, which is not going to look as smooth as it looks on this line, but it does have a different feel to it, that's for sure. So I could do something like this, and then I could speed this up again at the very end. And again, this does get really fiddly when this gets really, really fast. Let me zoom in here so you can see what's going on. Fast, we go down to slow, and then we speed up again. If this clip were 30 seconds longer, we might have a little bit more room to play with, but I think you can see where this is going. I want to show you just a few more things, and I'm going to reset this by going up here to Effect Controls, and I'm going to delete the keyframes. Now, Premiere has a really annoying pop-up every time you delete keyframes. It asks you, are you sure you want to do that? It's probably one of my least favorite things about Premiere. But I believe you need actually one keyframe for you to be able to use this. If we delete all the keyframes, you can see this is no longer blue, and I can't actually move that line anymore to change the speed of the clip. So I'm going to come back to the beginning and drop a single keyframe. So one more thing that I want to show you with speed ramps, I'm going to put a single keyframe here, and then I'm going to control drag over. And what that's going to do is these arrows indicate that the clip is going to play backwards during this section. So watch, play forwards, we play backwards, and then we go forwards again. It creates another keyframe because from this point, it's essentially back in time. And so it plays forward again to this, which is basically the same as this keyframe right here. We're going forward and then back to this point, and then forward back to this point. But we should be able to do some interesting things here, like maybe speed this up. So we're going negative speed now, and then back up here faster. You can see these keyframes. We can get kind of really funky with this. These keyframes are all over the place. So let's see what this looks like. We go. We're slowing down. Okay, I really don't like that kind of slow down there, and I want this to go much, much, much faster. And let's go much, much, much faster here. Let's see what this looks like. Oh, I think that's quite amusing. And you can come up with some really wacky combinations of speed ramps here where you're going in and out and in and out. And it really looks pretty smooth. That's all I have for speed ramps. Coming up next, you're going to learn about scene edit detection. In this lesson, you're going to learn about scene edit detection. Sometimes when you're editing, you don't get all the footage exactly how you would want it. Sometimes you get sent footage that has been edited already. It's not uncommon to get footage from another production company that includes a ton of B-roll that's basically all edited together in one long clip. And in the old days, sorting that out and breaking it up was pretty annoying. But there's a newer option in Premiere that makes sorting that out a lot easier. And I'm going to show you that right now. So I have in my project a ski montage clip that's basically my ski montage edit that I have exported. And I'm going to use this to show you the scene edit detection. So if I take my footage and I pull it out on the timeline, I'm going to mute the audio. And if I right-click on this, I have an option right here for scene edit detection. And what this is going to do is, well, it's going to do exactly what it says. It's going to automatically detect scene changes in flattened footage, which this is. This is one video file, and there are multiple cuts, and it's going to try and detect all of the scene changes. And there are a few options on what the output is going to be. So at the very basic level, it's going to apply a cut at each edit point. A lot of times that's sufficient. But we can also create a bin of subclips for each detected cut point and create a clip marker at each detected cut point. What I'm going to do is choose both of these and then click Analyze. And this is going to get to work analyzing the clips. Depending on the length of the clips involved here, this can take some time, but on my system and with this clip, this should go pretty fast. All right, let's take a look at what we have. I saw over here in the project panel that it created a new bin for me here, and I can see that there are a bunch of subclips here, which is very handy. And if I look over here, let's see if it got all of these edit points correct. Hey, look at that. Very cool. Now, it's not always going to get everything right. For example, it didn't necessarily understand that when the graphics came in here, it didn't detect that as a scene change. It probably has to do with the algorithm that's used. It also may get tripped up when various transitions are used. So I didn't have any transitions in here. I don't think there's any crossfades, not in this version. But in footage that does have crossfades, that may not detect that super well. Obviously, there isn't a definitive point in a crossfade. So if it does detect it, you could expect that it's not going to be great. But this actually looks really good. And that's basically all there is to scene edit detection. It's not a fancy feature, but it is a great feature to know about for breaking up big clips, montage footage, and big pieces of footage that have a ton of B-roll clips in them. Coming up in the next section, you're going to learn about raw footage, log footage, using Colorchecker cards, and shot matching. In this lesson, you are going to learn how to work with raw footage in Premiere. So for this lesson, I have two pieces of raw footage that I want to show you how to work with. The first is Blackmagic RAW, or B-RAW, and I want to start here because this is going to be probably the footage that you will encounter the most if you're working with raw footage at all throughout your editing journey. And this is because Blackmagic cameras are incredibly popular. It doesn't require a tremendous amount of processing power to play in Premiere. It doesn't take up a ton of space because there are a lot of different compression options. And getting the image to look good is really pretty simple. Now, if you have Blackmagic footage that you are working with, the first thing that you need to do is go to Blackmagic's site and download the latest version of the plugin for Premiere. Without that, the footage isn't going to work in Premiere at all. But once you install that, and it only takes a few minutes, when you pull your footage into a sequence and you look over here in the effect controls and you look under the source tab, which is over here, and if you haven't noticed this before, let me just explain how this works. This is the clip tab. So when you put effects on your video, they're going to show up right here on this clip tab. And if you have multiple instances of your clip, you can have different effects. You can change the opacity of one, or the scale, or the position of one, and the blend mode of one, and that will be different from all the other instances of the clip. However, the source tab is where you can put an effect that will be applied to every instance of the clip. And that is where Premiere has put this Blackmagic RAW plugin automatically. To adjust the image of this clip, because it does need to be adjusted, this is not something that you would export. It looks flat and ugly. You might think you could start over here in Lumetri, or Lumetri as I like to say. And you could give it a ton of contrast, maybe bump the exposure a bit, give it a little bit of saturation, and call it a day. This doesn't look terrible, but I would suggest that you start using the Blackmagic RAW plugin because it gives you a little bit more options, and it's probably going to squeeze a little bit more detail out of the image because Blackmagic certainly knows how to get this image right here to a Rec. 709 kind of contrasty image better than you or I. At least that's my opinion. So what I would do is come up here and change the decode option here to clip. You're not going to see anything change, but you will see all of these options here unlock. So we have options for the color science, and the latest color science is Gen 5. And I don't think there's any reason to use Gen 4 because Gen 5 does look better. You can change the white balance and the ISO. And the interesting thing about white balance and ISO is this is not an effect that it's applying. This is adjusting the image exactly as if you were adjusting it in camera, which works a lot better than when you try and do the same operation in post using an effect like Lumetri color or some other color correction effect. If you've ever tried to correct an image that has been shot with the wrong white balance using this tool, you'll know that you can get it close and sometimes it looks okay, but it never looks as good as if you were to set the white balance correctly in camera. So that's a big advantage. If something doesn't look right with the white balance, you can change it right here to one of these presets, and then you have more adjustments down here. And it's a much better way and more precise way of getting the colors to look correct than using Lumetri. So that's why I would start here. Same thing for ISO. If you need to make an exposure adjustment here, I would start using this ISO before you reach for this exposure slider here. This is probably going to result in a cleaner and better looking image. Now, if you don't want to fuss with too many of these settings, and this is not overly complicated, but maybe this is too complicated for you, and that's totally fine. Here's the quick way to do it. Leave the color space set to Blackmagic Design, and then change the gamma to Blackmagic Design Extended Video. I'm going to put the ISO back to 800 where it was before, and you can call this a day. This looks pretty good to me. I might make a few little tweaks with the shadows and maybe pull them a little towards blue. But other than that, I think this looks great. Now, if you think this looks a little too contrasty, you could roll off some of the contrast right here. But be careful when you are adjusting these. When you click and drag, you'll notice that the entire range of the value for this particular adjustment is 0 to 2. And if you look at 0, it's fully gray. And if you look at 2, it's like bananas. So it's very fiddly here, and you're definitely going to want to hold control while you're making this adjustment, which will make a much more fine movement of these values here. The default value is 1.58 for Blackmagic Extended Video. So if you want this a little bit less contrasty, you might crack it down to like 1.5 or somewhere in that neighborhood, and then go from there. You could add a little more saturation, maybe check this Use Black Video Level switch right here, and dial in the image. And then if I wanted to make further adjustments to this, I might hop over to Lumetri Color and dial in things to taste. But really, that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple to use this, and even though this is raw, it does not have to be overly complex. Let's look at another example. This is a clip from a Red Scarlet provided to me by my friend and colleague Andrew Manzano. And similarly, if we select this clip and jump over to Effect Controls and look at the Source tab, you'll see that Premiere has put the red plugin on this clip as well. Now, this is not something that you have to install. This comes with Premiere. And in a similar way, this has a ton of settings for adjusting the image. Now, this Red Raw plugin has a lot more controls than the Blackmagic Raw plugin, but you can take this image from looking super flat and adjust it really quickly. You can set the image pipeline from Legacy to IPP2, and then if you scroll down to the bottom under Output Transform Settings, you can change the color space to Rec. 709, and you're going to see a little shift in the colors there. It's pretty subtle, but they went from looking super desaturated and everything kind of green looking to, well, I would say more correct looking and a little bit more saturated. And then finally, the gamma curve, change it from log 3G10 to BT 1886, and you could call this a day. This is a nice contrasty image with good exposure. If you wanted to make adjustments from here, you could do that over here in Lumetri Color, or you can explore all of the controls that there are in this plugin. And like I said before, there are a lot. I don't think there's necessarily a right or correct way to go about doing this. As long as the final image looks good and it doesn't have a ton of noise in it, I think you're good to go. And if you were to make small adjustments with Lumetri Color to get this how you wanted it to look, I think you'd be okay. If you find that you are pushing the image a lot, you might switch the gamma curve back to log and then make adjustments here to the image. Maybe bump up the exposure and adjust the shadows, give it a little bit more saturation, adjust the color a little bit. Really quickly, you can get something that looks pretty similar. So that's not the whole story of RAW, but that should get you where you need to go for, I would say, 90% of the RAW footage that you are going to encounter. Coming up in the next lesson, you're going to learn about log footage and LUTs. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to use log footage and LUTs. So first, let's talk about what log footage is. Log footage is a way for a camera to store the information from the sensor in a non-linear way. Log stands for logarithmic, and it's a way to map the luminance values of the image to get more information into the video file. Now, the result is that the image tends to look really flat and sort of lifeless, like what you see here. Just about every camera manufacturer has cameras that shoot in log. It's been around for many, many years. But it needs something in post-production to take it from looking like this, which is very sad and lacking contrast and saturation, and get it to something that looks appropriate for your final product. It basically needs to be transformed. And that's done usually with something called a LUT. LUT stands for lookup table. And it's just a list of numbers that corresponds to how to remap this very flat image and adjust the luminance to get it to look appropriate for the color space that you are trying to transform it to. And most of the time, that's going to be Rec 709, unless you're working on a big feature film and they're working in DCI-P3 or Rec 2020 color or something more advanced like that. And if you do some searching online, you will find many hundreds, if not thousands, of LUTs that you can use on your footage. But those are going to be creative LUTs, which we're going to look at in a minute. What I would suggest to you is that you start using a manufacturer's LUT to transform this image, because they're going to be the experts on the image sensor, the color science, and in my experience, that's the best place to start. So that's what I'm going to show you here. So this particular footage was shot with a Zcam E2, and I'm going to use the manufacturer's LUT to get this to look great in just a couple of clicks. To do that, I'm going to come over here to Lumetri Color. In the Basic Correction tab, I'm going to come to this Input LUT dropdown, and then I'm going to go to Browse. I'm going to go to where I have my LUTs stored. Now, Zcam gives their users a ton of LUTs. Everything from default exposure to +1, -1, +2, -2, +3, and -3 exposures to compensate for however you shot the footage. In this particular case, I purposely shot this overexposed by roughly 2 spots because that's what the manufacturer recommends. So I'm going to use the -2 exposure LUT to compensate for that. Other camera makers may not have this many LUTs available, but that's one of the cool things about Zcam. So even though this list has a ton of LUTs in it, what the manufacturer recommends is this zRGB AX2 LUT. So that's the one that I'm going to use. And you're going to see, with almost no work, the image goes from looking terrible to looking pretty much ready to go with just a couple of clicks. Now, I want to show you the difference between using a LUT to transform the image and just doing it using these controls right here in Lumetri, which you certainly can do, but I wouldn't recommend it. So this is the same exact clip, and I'm going to come over here to Lumetri. I'm going to jack the contrast all the way to 150, which, by the way, this slider only goes to 100, but if you grab the number and click and drag, you can get it up to 150. And we need that for this particular clip. I'm going to take the saturation and bump that up to around 150 as well, and drop the exposure by -0.2. And I think you'll agree that that pretty much matches the exposure here on this clip right here, which has the manufacturer's LUT and no other adjustments in Lumetri. So in general, the exposure and the contrast are pretty similar, but they're not exactly the same. And this is what I'm talking about by using the manufacturer's LUT. You could adjust the image on your own, but why would you? Because this image is better, and that's not subjective, that's objective. If we look at the color of the skin here on my buddy John, and to do that, I'm going to use the crop effect and crop right up here on his forehead. And thankfully, John doesn't have a lot of hair, so we have a lot of skin to work with. And in this case, that's a good thing. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I've applied the same crop effect and zoomed it in. And then we look at Lumetri scopes, and I have the vector scope YUV pulled up. This line here in Lumetri scopes is the skin tone line. And you can see on the clip that I adjusted the color, the skin color is not exactly on the line. It's close, but it's not on the line. And if you compare that to this one, this is pretty much dead on the line. It might be skewing just a hair to magenta, but it's certainly a heck of a lot closer than this. This would need to be adjusted maybe a little bit because it looks a little yellow to me, and the scope verifies that it is looking a little yellow. So what I'm suggesting is that you start with the manufacturer's LUT because it'll just save you work. If you don't like this image and you want to make further refinements to it, you could knock yourself out, but at least you're starting with the correct colors because it came from the manufacturer that way. Now that's a basic transform LUT. We transformed it from log to a Rec 709 color by using the manufacturer's LUT. Now let's talk about creative LUTs. Creative LUTs are what you can use to take the image from here and give them that creative special sauce. It could be like a cinematic look or maybe an Instagram sort of look. And Adobe comes with a number of these, which you can see right here. Unfortunately, because of how I have my monitor set up, this list is going off the screen. But Adobe comes with a bunch of stock things that look like this, or this, or this. And you can scroll through and you can kind of preview these. But if these don't do it for you, you have a lot more options. I'm going to set this back to none. And you can find a ton of great looking creative LUTs on Envato Elements. In fact, I found one called 1000 Color Grading Presets for Premiere Pro, and it has probably more LUTs than you will ever need to use. And you can load them into Lumetri Color by creating a folder. So on Windows, if you navigate to the C drive, Program Files, Adobe, and Common, and you create a folder called LUTs right here, and then inside this folder, if you create a folder called Technical, and you create a folder called Creative, and inside the Creative, you copy over the LUT files, they will show up in Lumetri right here. Now you can just see the end of that list. The rest of it goes way up on one of my monitors above here. But now they're available right here, and you can actually scroll through and preview those right over here. Now, one of the disadvantages of this is it's a little clunky to do because the list becomes very long. And once you apply one of these, this previewer resets. So if you want to see a preview of another one, you have to click like 100 times to get to the end of the list. And that's pretty annoying. Thankfully, this particular LUT pack came with a preset file that you can install, and that's very easy. Over here in the Effects tab, in this little flyout here, you can choose Import Preset, and then you can navigate to wherever you have that LUT pack stored. So for me, it's right here, and you can see this is the preset file, and I've already imported that. And now I have a preview right down here of what all of these look like. I can click on a folder, I can scroll and find a LUT that I think looks great, And there are a ton of really good looking LUTs in here. And I can just double click this and it applies to my footage here, which is very cool. Now, the one thing you want to watch out for is this applies LUTs in a different way. So over here, when I was showing you these creative LUTs, it's applied in this single instance of Lumetri color, and it's applied in this creative tab right here. If you're using the effects preset LUTs right here, when you select one, let's say we do this violet one right here, it inserts another Lumetri color instance with that LUT loaded on here. I believe it's in the creative tab. So if you come over here to the Lumetri color panel and you click on this little effects dropdown, you can switch back and forth between this is the first instance of Lumetri and this is the one with the LUT loaded. And you can see it's loaded right there. So if you want to adjust the intensity of this, you need to do this on the second Lumetri color plugin. And you want to watch out for any other color correction that you are going to do. If you need to do any kind of secondary color correction or do anything with the color wheels, you want to probably add this creative LUT at the very end of all of that. Otherwise, it's going to give you trouble because this is affecting the colors quite severely. But it's a super easy way to add a lot of different looks. So if I wanted something different, I'll just delete this. And like I said before, I do like some of these Instagram ones. Let's check these out. I think these are pretty cool looking. Very cool. That looks maybe a little too intense, so I'd probably knock down that just a little bit, but I think that's very cool. So check out that pack from Envato Elements. It's 1,000 color grading presets. A lot of great stuff in there. There's even some VHS noise loops. There are some film loops and some light leaks in that pack as well. It's got some very cool stuff in there. In the next lesson, you are going to learn how to use a Colorchecker card. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to use a Colorchecker chart to dial in your white balance and your color in Premiere. Now, this particular Colorchecker chart was made by X-Rite. It's called the Colorchecker Video. I believe it's the Video Passport because it's the smaller one. They have a larger studio version. And you can find other charts from companies like DSC Labs and others. Over here, you can check your white balance and exposure. But for now, we're concerned with color for the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows. On this side, we have even more kind of gray, neutral chips. This column represents a skin tone color. And then over here, we have some colors that correspond to colors in the vector scope. So let's dig into this and make some adjustments. Now, just judging by my eye and not paying attention to the scopes, I would say that this looks pretty decent. It may be a slight bit warm, but there's not anything glaring about this. But I think perhaps we can get it to a little bit better place in terms of its color. To do that, I'm going to grab a crop effect and jump over to the effects here. And I'm just going to crop in on these 3 chips right here. And I'm going to zoom in on them. Then if I jump back over to the scopes, this is Lumetri scopes, and I have the waveform monitor set to RGB. You can see that actually my highlight and my midtone are skewing a little warm. If these were pure white, they would be white here because this is RGB. And when you have pure white, the RGB overlay and it makes white in the scope. And my shadow is actually skewing a little bit blue. So how would I make an adjustment for this? Well, I would probably start by going to the effects controls and maybe dialing back the color temperature slightly to something like 5400. And let me check back with the scopes here. I think that's pretty close. It's in a pretty good spot. However, my shadows are still kind of blue. I mean, you can pretty clearly see that if your monitor is anything close to accurate, you'll see that that looks very blue, and that's not great. To get it the rest of the way, we're going to have to make some more refinements. Now, I could mess back and forth with the color temperature here. In fact, it may be better to put it like at 5340. Let's check back over here. I think that looks pretty good. I may jump back to the crop and just crop the top a little more, and that may help clean up this scope a little bit better. I think that's pretty close. So I'm going to leave it for now. One thing that needs to be dealt with is the shadows, and they're definitely skewing blue. And I think the best way to do that is to make a selection using HSL secondary. This tool in Lumetri gives you really sort of granular control over the selection that you make. So in this case, I'm going to deselect hue and saturation, and I'm only going to deal with luminance. I'm going to drag this down so that I'm just selecting this shadow section in here. In fact, I'll take off crop so I can see exactly what this is doing. I'll turn on this mask right here so I can see exactly what it's selecting. So maybe just these darkest areas here is good to start. I think that's pretty good. I may turn up the denoise a little bit. I'm going to leave the blur alone for now. And now I can make an adjustment here. I'm going to recrop this and take off this mask so I can see what it's doing. I'll pull up Lumetri scopes again. And then I can make an adjustment here to this white balance. Now I could use this color wheel here. This is actually just the mid-tone color wheel, I believe. But if I correct using the temperature and tint sliders here, it's going to correct all of the colors in my selection rather than just the mid-tones. If I reset these and I just try and drag the mid-tones around, you're going to see that it's not going to do maybe the exact thing that I want. So I'm just going to make an adjustment here to the tint and the temperature and try and get that dialed in a little bit. Those are pretty drastic adjustments there, but let's see if I take off the crop effect, what that looks like. I think that actually worked pretty well. So I'm going to leave that for now. But look at my scopes. Those are all looking great for those chips right there. I'm going to take my crop effect, reset it, and now let's look at these colors right here in this color column. And I'm going to show you, we're going to pull up the vector scope. I'm going to zoom in on those. And I'm going to change this to vector scope. I'm going to get rid of the waveform. And now what you see is each one of these corresponds to one of the colors in the vector scope. We have yellow, red, magenta, blue, cyan, and green. I might crop in on the left side just a hair more and the right side just a hair more, like that. And that should clean up the vector scope. Very good. Now we're really cooking. So to make some corrections here, you can see that not all of these are in line with their boxes. The further out the blobs are in this scope, that has to do with their saturation. So all of these colors are not equally saturated. They probably should be. So to make these sorts of adjustments, I'm going to come into the curves. I'm going to pull down the hue saturation curves here, and I can make some selections to modify this. Now, to make this just a little easier and a little more visible for you, I'm going to jack up the saturation overall, which is going to skew things out a little bit, and that's going to make it a little bit easier to see what I'm doing. You don't always have to do this, but for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to. And for the hue versus hue, I'm going to make a selection for the green. So basically, I'm selecting the green, and I want to change the hue of the green. You can see over here, I've made a little selection, and I want to select the middle dot here, and I'm going to pull that back so that it's in line with this green box right here. Now, I believe you can change the brightness for this if you want to juice that up a little bit. So that'll make it a little bit easier to view. Let's check out some of these other colors. Red is not quite right, so we can grab red there and maybe pull that back just ever so slightly. Making this Lumetri panel a little bigger can make it easier to make very fine adjustments. If it's really small, if it's really small, they can be pretty fiddly. So I'm going to select magenta here and just push that over ever so slightly. I'm going to push blue over just a little bit. There we go. And I think cyan is looking pretty good. Next, let's deal with some of these saturation. So I've boosted the saturation up to 200, which is probably not going to look good overall. But maybe I can take something like this yellow and reduce its saturation, because according to the vector scope, it looks more saturated than the other colors. So let me just pull that back a little bit. And I might take this cyan color here and maybe boost that up a touch. Something like that. Now things are looking a little bit more equalized. Maybe blue could also use just a little bump in the saturation department. Just a hair. I think that looks okay. All right, let's jump back to effects controls. I'm going to take off my crop effect here and check out how my image looks. Okay, things are looking not bad. It is still hyper saturated, so I'm going to pull that saturation back to more realistic levels here. I think this image looks pretty good. Let's check out a before and an after. Okay, so I know this may be hard to see, but it is actually doing something. Let me zoom into 100% here. Actually, let me go to 50%. So this is before. Oh, this is after. And this is what we had before. So the shift is pretty subtle, but you can definitely tell that the shadows now look cleaner and these colors look better. They're more equalized in terms of their saturation, and they're more representative of the colors that they're supposed to be. So I think we're doing pretty good here. I'm going to reset my view here, and I'm going to reset my crop effect. Finally, I'm going to check in on these skin tone colors here. If you do anything to correct the image, I would say ignore the other colors and just get the skin tones right, because really that's all people care about. If skin doesn't look like the right color, your eye is going to notice it right away. It's kind of a thing that humans are really good at, is knowing that skin tones look like skin tones and not too green or too yellow. And in this case, they don't look exactly right. They're skewing a little bit yellow, which is perhaps not the best. So I'm going to come back over here to the curves and hue saturation curves, and I'm going to make a selection here, and it's going to select orange because pretty much all people of all colors have orange skin, whether they're very dark skinned or very light skinned. And we want these to be more along the skin tone line, which is right here. So I'm just going to push that hue up a little bit and get those back to looking like orange. And I think they do. So that looks pretty good. All right, let's make a final check on our image here. There we go. Let's do a before and an after. Yeah, it's definitely looking like we did some good work here. So I'm pretty pleased with this. That process is not incredibly difficult, but it's also not as automated as it is in something like Resolve, where they have a tool specifically for this color checker that will balance the colors for you. But it's really not too tricky once you get this dialed in. And for a particular shoot, if you're in the same location, you only have to do it once, and then you can apply this Lumetri effect to all the other clips to balance them. As long as they're in the same lighting conditions, this chip chart should read the same. So it's not something you have to use for every shot. As long as you're in the same location, under the same lights, you can apply this correction to all of your clips. Coming up next, we're going to look at how to match shots from different cameras when you don't have a chip chart, and that's going to be pretty interesting. So check that out coming up next. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to match shots for color. So in this example, I have two clips here that were part of a multi-camera shoot. And unfortunately, they're not from the same camera, so they look different. On top of that, this was a shoot that I was doing, and one of these cameras was basically handed to me about 2 minutes before the folks walked in to shoot, so I didn't have time to set this particular shot right up here, which was from a Sony, I think it was an A6400. I didn't have time to go in and set it to one of the log picture profiles and get the white balance dialed in. I thought I had it pretty close, but clearly it is not that great at all. These look wildly different. So this was shot on my Zcam E2, and it has been color corrected, but it more or less looked like this out of the box. This one hasn't been color corrected, but you can see it definitely needs some help. Now, there are some tools built into Lumetri Color that can potentially help you to match these shots. And that is in this section right here under Color Wheels and Match in the Lumetri Color panel. If you don't have this up, you can go over here to Window and then down here to Lumetri Color. And in this section, Color Wheels and Match, you can click Comparison View. And then what this will allow you to do is set a reference frame, which Premiere will attempt to try and match the colors of. So what I want to do is kind of scrub in the timeline here. And if you have a bunch of shots, you can pick from any of them. So I'm going to go, let's see. All right, here's the frame that I want to use. Face detection is enabled, and I'm going to click Apply Match. Let's see what happens. Yeah, so that didn't work at all. Let me reset this. I'm going to click Comparison View again. Okay, let's try again. Okay, that didn't work at all. I wonder, let me reset this one more time. I'm going to turn face detection off. Let me apply a match now. Okay, so this doesn't work for this particular example. And in fact, I've not gotten this to work a whole bunch of times in other projects. When I have gotten it to work, it does work pretty well. And I have no idea how people on YouTube get this to work because I cannot get this to work with my footage. Anyway, that's okay, because I'm going to show you how to do it the old-fashioned way. So let's get to that. I'm going to take it off comparison view and then reset this. I'm going to duplicate my footage by Alt-dragging, and then I'm going to bring it over here and throw it on the video layer above here, and then throw a crop effect on this layer and just crop the side just a hair. Yeah, something like that. And then move this over to the side. In fact, I can probably move this over a little bit as well. And then I'm going to make sure that I have Lumetri scopes up, and I don't want to look at the vector scope. I want to look at the waveform RGB, at least to start. So the waveform is going to give us luminance information. The higher it is here, the brighter it is, but the waveform RGB is also going to give us color information. You can kind of see the sections and kind of where the colors are sitting, which will hopefully provide a little bit more information about getting these shots to match. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to lock this layer up here so I don't accidentally keep adjusting that layer here. Click down here, and I'm going to make some exposure adjustments to try and match the exposure just a little bit better, because that's going to affect everything down the line. And I can see at the very top of my waveform monitor that the white sections here are basically getting clipped. They are above 100, and over here they are not. So I think this is probably the same area right in here. So if I take the whites and I pull those down, I can kind of match where those are. And in fact, there is information there. So it's not completely clipped as in no information. If we look at 100% here, there are parts of it that are clipped all the way, but we did get back some detail for sure. If we look at the before and after, we're pulling down some tones. It is subtle, but there's something there, and that's good. I'm going to switch this back to fit, and I'm going to make some other adjustments here. Maybe push up the exposure here just a touch, pull down the whites just a hair more, maybe bring up the shadows a little bit and try to match the level of the background just a little bit. Maybe that's too much on the shadows. We can kind of use these scopes as a guide too. So the background is sitting maybe just a little too bright. Bring that down here, kind of match those up just a little bit. Now, it's really hard to tell because this is clearly more blue. So once I get the exposure in the zone close to matching this other shot here, I'm going to take the temperature slider and just move that over a little bit. Now, I don't want to go over too far because that is going to tint the highlights more than perhaps I want. So just a little bit of a temperature correction here, I think, is going to help. And maybe bring those whites down a little bit more, something like that. I think going by the scopes here, that looks like these exposures are pretty close. Now, the skin tones still are not matching correctly, but instead of pushing the temperature anymore, I'm going to go to the color wheels and I'm going to just push the midtones a little bit instead of adjusting all the colors. Now that will still adjust highlights and shadows, but it's going to more so adjust the midtones. So just push those over to orange just a little bit, I think will help. Now the background here went way out when before it was close, but the skin tones didn't match so much. Maybe just back it off just a touch. I think that's a little bit better. I can see that the hair here, there's a little bit more color here. I'm going to zoom in so you can see that. So if you look at just the hair, I can see this is a little red, and this is maybe just a touch less saturated. So I can take the shadows over here and then maybe just pull those ever so slightly to blue, or maybe, yeah, in this general blue direction. And that will essentially take out some of the red in the shadows. And that was a very subtle adjustment, but you'll see if I go on and off, hopefully you can see it's making a little bit of a shift there. So we're getting the skin and the hair, I think, a little closer. It looks maybe just a touch magenta. So I could push this just a little bit green. I don't want to go too far because I don't want to make this really look that green, but that looks like it could be close. Shirt color looks okay. Let's keep moving. What other things here are sticking out? Well, the jeans color is not quite close. So let's address that. I'm going to go to curves and I'm going to grab the hue versus hue color picker here and just pick the color of the jeans and see if I can adjust the hue of the jeans. Now I can see some tones shifting, but I think I have to make a bigger selection here. So I'm going to just expand that out and get these to more of a bluish color. So let's see if you can see before and after. It definitely is shifting. It's very, very subtle. I think another thing that may help is grabbing the hue versus saturation here and pushing up the saturation of just the blues in the image, which will also be very subtle because there's just not very much blue in there to push up. I don't want to push it up a lot. In fact, the green is definitely not working, but it looks like actually, let me undo that. Looks like I can maybe pull the greens down to blue as well. Yeah, look at that. You can just barely see if I really push this around. There's a section right in here that's kind of registering more as a green tone, but I can pull that down to blue a little bit right down here. There we go. Okay, let me see. Is this doing anything? A little bit. So let's see if that made a difference. I think they look a little better than they were before. So I'll turn off this whole adjustment here. Oh yeah, that's definitely looking green. And with the adjustment, it's looking more blue. It's not perfect, but it's definitely closer. Okay, it looks like the skin could go just a little bit more to the maybe orange side. So I could possibly get that with a hue versus hue and just get that a little more orange, although it is not looking quite right to me. So I'm not going to do that. Let me just undo that. Maybe I'll push the midtones just a touch more orange for now. The big thing that I want to tackle is I want to try and get this background a little bit more towards this kind of greenish red tone over here. It's looking a little bit too magenta and monochromatic. But I'm going to tackle the background and some final tweaks in the next lesson. So check that out coming up next. In this lesson, I'm going to pick up where I left off in the last lesson, working on color matching these shots. So in the last lesson, I saw that the background was really not matched at all. So let's pick it up there and try and fix that. So to do that, I'm going to rename this instance, and I'll call this basic. And then from the same dropdown, I'm going to add another Lumetri color effect. This time I'm going to go into HSL secondary, and I'm going to grab the color picker here, and I'm going to pick this range, and then I'll grab the add color picker and then just click and drag here to make sure I get all of those tones. If I click on the show mask button here, you can see, yep, I'm definitely grabbing all of the tones here. I'm picking up a little in the face, but that's just how it is in this shot. The background is registering as the same color as his skin, unfortunately. There's nothing that can be done about that. So I'm going to denoise this a little bit. That's going to help clean up that selection. And then I think I can just get away with pushing the midtones over to green just a little bit. That's looking better. It's not perfect, but I think it's better. I don't know if I can push the highlights up to orange, but I think this is going in the right direction. So this is before, and this is after. I think it definitely matches better. I don't think I can get it perfect, but they do look much more similar. Now, if I was going to do one final step, I know this video is getting kind of long, but one final step, here's what I would do. I would take the crop effect and apply it to this layer down here, and I would crop up on a portion of the skin, probably this cheek right here because it's nice and flat to the camera, and then zoom up on it, just like that. And then I'll do the same thing to this shot over here. So I'm going to crop up on the skin. Let me see, just like this. I know it's looking a little bit crazy. Just stay with me here. And then slide this over. So basically now I have the two different skin tones here. The other thing that I can do is pull up the vector scope and make sure that both of these are going to be filling the screen, and I'll just go back and forth. So I'm just going to reset the position on both of these. So let's look at just where it falls on the skin tone line here in the vector scope. So actually, it's pretty close. They're both on the line. This is skewing, maybe the highlights are skewing just maybe a little bit magenta. It's tough to tell because I don't have the same kind of selection here. But it's in the neighborhood. I don't think that's too much to fuss about at this point. So I can take that crop effect off, and that would be fine. The only thing that I would probably want to do with this Lumetri color is, because it is affecting a little bit of his skin, is just draw a really quick and rough mask around him. Now, if he moves, the mask is obviously not going to get everything, but that's okay. And I'm just going to try and pull this out here, just like this, and give it a lot of feather, something like that, and then invert this. And so now if we look at the mask, for example, it's basically just going to take out all of this jazz right here, which is fine because I don't want it to adjust his skin tone in the shadow regions at all. I just want it to adjust the chairs in the background. And I think that is going to work just like that. So there you go. There's a very quick and dirty kind of color adjustment. Certainly this is a lot more difficult than if you have two cameras that are different and they're both shooting in log, because that's going to give you just a little bit more wiggle room to adjust the image. But even if they're not, you can do quite a bit to match the colors. So for example, this is where we were before, and this is where we are now. You can see that the entire image looks better. This looks like a hot mess. It's way too contrasty. These whites here are blown out. It looks blue. And this actually looks pretty good. In fact, if we were to go back and forth between this shot right here, I'll just play this for a second, and this, I don't think you would notice a huge, huge shift. There is some, and there's probably a little bit more work that can be done. And hopefully that will help you when you are trying to match shots. All right, coming up in the next section, you're going to learn about audio editing in Premiere. In this lesson, you are going to learn how to fix audio drift in Premiere. So audio drift is something that can happen when you are recording on devices that do not have the same synchronization clock for audio. These can be different cameras. These can be a camera that records audio and a separate audio device. And in this particular example, I'm going to show you some audio drift, although it's pretty mild that happened, and I'm going to show you how to fix it. This is my friend Peter Engler, and you're looking at a clip that I shot of a podcast that I help my local church produce when they need to bring in remote guests. And I have a sequence opened here with footage from my Zcam E2, and the audio that my Zcam records is just scratch audio. It's just the on-camera microphone. And then I take Peter's mic here and I send that over to an audio interface on my computer that I do the remote guest hosting on, and I record the audio in Reaper, which is a audio workstation application, and I also route it through a browser so that the guest can hear Peter's nice audio coming from this microphone right here. And what you'll see if I pull out Pete's audio, so I'm going to find it over here. It looks like, so I think this is Peter's audio right here. So I'm going to pull Pete's audio out on the timeline and try and sync that up. Actually, I'm just going to right click and see if Adobe can synchronize this for me. Okay, let's see how close it got the audio here.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, it's in the neighborhood, but it's really not that close. So I'm going to hit the tilde key to bring the sequence full screen and then just manually align this. You can, if you go into the menu of your sequence and then select Show Audio Time Units, we can get right in here and try and line this up a little better.
There you go. There you go. Love it. Well,
so if you hear that sort of sound where it doesn't sound weird and phasey, you know that it's pretty much in sync. So the beginning is perfectly in sync, but if I go all the way to the end, and this is like a 55-minute-ish recording, so I'm going to go to the end and then zoom in here, what you'll see is the audio
it's all good. So make sure you follow them there.
Is no longer in sync, and they don't line up. But this is actually a really easy thing to fix. And how I usually do that is I'll come to the end of the audio and I'll find two kind of audio blobs that I know match. So I know this is actually supposed to be over here. It's supposed to be in sync with the video. And so what I'll do is I'll just trim this back to just the start of this audio blob, then grab the rate stretch tool and pull that out so it just aligns to the beginning of this audio blob here. And I can zoom in to get that much more precise. And that's really probably as precise as I need to go with this. And I bet if I play it right here,
So go to whygotwhypodcast.com.
it's going to be perfectly in sync. Now you can drill down if you want, if you're doing a similar sort of thing, and really try to get this a little bit more in sync. Like it looks like maybe these three little blobs here might align better right here. I don't know. It's only a couple of samples off, so I wouldn't worry about this. So now anywhere that I click in this, anywhere that I click when Peter is talking, because you can see there's areas here where he's not talking, these two files should sound more or less perfectly in sync.
Because I think a lot of our listeners, so I'm sitting with you in your counseling office. I'm like in free counseling. So next thing, and maybe that's a form of stuckness too. So
this all sounds perfectly acceptable to me. There may be just a hair of weird sort of out of phase sound that you get here and there, but it's not going to be anything that I would be concerned about at all. It's certainly better than having the audio slowly fall out of sync by the end. And this sort of sound that you're hearing right here,
so like you talked about like marriage relations,
where it sounds like it's maybe just a few samples out of sync, is not anything that you'll notice once you mute this.
Relationships.
It's going to sound perfectly fine, and you won't notice that it's out of sync at all with picture, because we're talking about just a handful of samples that the audio is shifted. Now there's two things that I want to draw your attention to. So when you stretch audio and you use this sequence inside of another sequence, Premiere doesn't always display the waveforms correctly. It won't show the stretched waveforms. It'll display the waveforms as if this audio clip here was not stretched. And that can be problematic if you are trying to edit and chasing down like weird mouth noises, which will show up like little clicks like this, because they're not going to be where they should be when I put this sequence inside of another sequence. So to get around that, what you should do is render this out. And to do that, I just hit Control M. I set the format to waveform audio. It should be on 48 kilohertz, and the sample size should either be 16 or 24-bit. If your recorded audio is 16-bit, there's no reason to export a 24-bit file. It's essentially just wasting space. But if it's a 24-bit file coming in to Premiere, I would export it as a 24-bit file. And you then want to just re-import it into the project. And that only takes just a couple of seconds. In fact, I'll do it right now. So now if I look over here, I should have an audio file here. And the nice thing about this is it's going to match the length of my sequence perfectly, so I don't have to worry about accidentally moving this clip at all. So that's one thing. Let me just delete this here. The other thing to note is that when you stretch an audio file, either you make it longer or you make it shorter, it does change the pitch of the audio. Now, if I right-click on this and go to speed and duration, what you'll see is the speed is set to 99.98. That's 0.02%. And that amount of pitch change is not going to be audible. However, if it was 1% or 2%, if I had to set this to 99 or 98%, at that point, you'd probably be able to detect a very slight change in pitch. If it's more than that, you'll almost certainly be able to detect it. So you have an option here to maintain audio pitch. Now, if that doesn't sound quite right to you, and I expect that it probably would sound fine, you have another option to add an audio effect over here in the audio track mixer. In fact, Premiere comes with one called Pitch Shifter. Now, I would guess that the maintain audio pitch option in the speed and duration is probably good enough, but if it, for whatever reason, sounded weird, you can try to manually correct the pitch, either up or down, using this effect right here. I don't necessarily think that this would sound better, but it's another option for you. So, normally what I would do is just delete that and then throw in my new audio file here, and I would be good to go. So that's basically how to fix audio drift. Now, like I said before, there are a couple of other kind of forms of audio drift. Let's say, for example, you were recording with different cameras, and some of those cameras were lower quality, like mobile phone cameras or web cameras. Sometimes the video that you get from a mobile phone's camera or a web camera has really, really odd sync issues. You may be able to sync the audio in the beginning, and then you'll find that like 5 minutes later, it's out of sync again, but 10 minutes later, it's back in sync, which means at some point there was some kind of thing that made the video frame rate or even audio slow down a little bit and then speed back up. And so in that case, as long as it's not constant talking, because if it's constant talking, that's going to be a real trick. But if it's like a podcast like this, what I would do is cut the audio every so often. I'm going to mute this up here. And then try and manually realign every place that it goes out of sync. That's very tedious to do, but I've had to do it even recently, recording remote interviews. Sometimes the cameras and the files that you get just don't sync, or sometimes they drift a little bit depending on an internet connection or whatever. So that pretty much covers fixing audio drift in Premiere. Coming up in the next lesson, you're going to learn about merging audio clips with video clips. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to merge audio and video clips in Premiere. Let's say, for example, you have a project that's somewhat similar to this, where you have a video clip with scratch audio, and then you have separate audio recorded maybe on an audio recorder, and you need to use those in multiple sequences. Now, if you synchronize them in one sequence, it can be annoying if you go over to your project panel and you navigate to your footage and then you pull it in again and then you have to find your audio and then pull that in again. That's more steps than you need to do because Premiere has a feature that can merge these clips together. And I'm going to show you how that works. You can do it right from the sequence. So from my Zcam sequence here, I can select both my video with the scratch audio and my audio. I can right click and choose merge clips. Now I don't have a whole lot of options here. I can change the name of the clip. I can select use audio timecode. That's not really going to help in this example. And if I click OK, I'm going to get my merged clip right over here. And you can see what that has done to the audio files. For some reason, and I don't fully understand why, but it's not a big deal, it takes this stereo audio file and this stereo audio file and kind of splits them into 4 mono files. What you can do is you can come over here, right-click on your merged file in the project panel, go up to Modify and then Audio Channels, and then what I might do in this instance is just deselect everything except the last clip. And that's because I know that this audio file here, even though it's a stereo file, it has the same content on the right and the left. So there's no good reason to bring in 2 mono files. And if I click OK, I'm just going to delete this out of my sequence. And now when I pull it in, you can see it's exactly how I would want it. And that is the single video clip and my single audio clip. This makes setting keyframes a heck of a lot easier in dealing with it. So now I can use this in multiple sequences. It's got my synced audio and I'm good to go. Let me show you one other way to go about doing this. And that is if you select your audio in the project panel and you select your video, you right click and choose merge clips. Now you have a bunch of options for synchronizing. Now, these clips are already synchronized, so I don't really have to synchronize them using the audio or timecode. They don't have timecode, so that wouldn't work anyway. But I can synchronize them with the in point because I know that they both have the same exact in point, and that'll work just fine. However, if you have audio that was recorded on an audio recorder, there's almost no way that that's going to have the same in point as your video clip. So what you'd probably want to do in that case is select audio and then select which track channel you want to try and synchronize from. Normally, if you're using a pretty decent recorder and a pretty decent camera, you're not going to have to worry about the audio drift issue that you saw in the previous lesson. Synchronizing with the audio is a pretty good option, but in my case, I don't need to do that. The other thing you can do when you are merging clips from the project panel is you can select remove audio from AV clip. This is going to remove the camera's audio, so I don't have to go through that extra step. So here's my merged clip. It does make 2 mono clips again, but I can quickly come in here, go to Modify, select that. Boom, I'm good to go. Merging clips is pretty simple to do, and it's a very handy thing to know how to do. I will show you one other way that you can achieve the same thing, and that is by just using a nested sequence. So if I come over, let's say I make a new sequence here. I'm just going to pick whatever is loaded up there. I can take my Zcam sequence and pull it out, and I basically have the same idea as a merged clip, except now I can go in and I can put adjustment layers on this or effects and other things in this layer right here. I can mute the audio and it should update. Yeah, check that out. Now I have the right audio waveform displaying here. You can see what happens when I unmute that. It will revert to, I think, the camera's audio, or maybe it's kind of mixing it together. But if I go ahead and mute this one right here, it's only going to show the good audio that I want. So that essentially does the same thing as merging clips, although it does take a few extra steps to set up. So merging clips, it's a really handy thing to know how to do, and that pretty much covers it. All right, coming up in the next lesson, you're going to learn how to use multiple compressors in Premiere. In this lesson, you are going to learn how and why you might want to use multiple compressors in Premiere. So picking up with the last few lessons, I'm going to be showing you how I go about addressing the audio levels and processing for this podcast episode here. In particular, we're going to be taking a look at my buddy Peter's voice here. He's the host of the Why God Why podcast. It's a podcast that I help my local church produce when they bring in remote guests. So let me play you the first couple of seconds of this so you can hear the music and get a feel for what's going on. The only effect that I have applied right now is a parametric EQ for Pete's voice, but that's it.
Welcome to the Why God Why podcast. I am hosting alone. My name is Peter Englert. I'm here with our producer, Dave Bode. We have a special guest today, all the way from Portland, Oregon. It's Savon Penn. Savon is a counselor and a life coach. He also is a blogger and an author. And we're really focusing our conversation today.
All right. So you can hear that I made a small change to the audio gain. This is actually fixing a slight mistake that I did when I recorded this. He came into the podcast a little bit hotter than I was expecting, and I was afraid it was going to clip, so I turned him down and then realized that was a little too much, so I turned his gain back up. But despite that, you can hear that there are some kind of higher and lower levels here, especially if I play this section right here, and I'll just solo up Pete's channel.
In the pandemic, trying to make changes. It's a universal theme. We know where we want to go, whether that's we want to be less anxious.
This sounds good, but a compressor is really going to help. So what I like to do is actually use a compressor to do two things. One, I like it to knock down these upper peaks here and then boost up everything else. And I also like to use a compressor, or more specifically, a dynamics processor, to take things like the breath noises in between his words like this.
To go.
And I like to use a dynamics processor to push those down. And the reason why I use multiple compressors is I can't use one to do both. If I take this dynamics processor, and by the way, I am applying this effect in the audio track mixer, and if you haven't used that before, come up here to Window, and then you can pull it up with this option right here, Audio Track Mixer. And then you can apply a number of different effects over here. And the effect that I just put on is under Amplitude and Compression, and it's Dynamics Processing. And I like to use this Dynamics Processor because it allows me to do compression, which kind of looks like this. So as the audio comes in on this line, if it comes in at like negative 15, it's going to go out lower. You can see that. In fact, if I do like kind of a limiter shape here, it shouldn't really let any audio past negative 20. That's what this line indicates here. So anything that comes in above here is actually going to go out at negative 20. But I can also use this dynamics processor to do something called expansion. And that is when the audio is below, let's say, this point right here. So if the audio comes in at negative, let's say, negative 30, it's actually going to go out at like negative 38. I like to set this up such that it's going to pull down these in-between moments and create just a little bit more dynamic range. And then I also like to use a compressor to kind of compress the top bits of the audio signal in a shape that kind of looks like this. So right now, this section is kind of boosting the level up such that if it comes in at, let's say, negative 20, you can see right there, it's actually going to go out up here at close to negative 10. So it's kind of a 10 decibel increase in level. But then as we go up here, it's getting turned up and then kind of simultaneously compressed. You can see this top node here, number 1, is doing some compression as well as kind of boosting the level. The problem with this is, in order to get this compressor to work, and I'm just going to reset this here by selecting one of the presets and then changing it back to default. The problem is, in order to get the compressor to work, so let's say I wanted this to do some hard limiting, and this is not what I would do, but just for instance, in this case, the compressor should not let anything above negative 20 pass through this dynamics processor. But if I play this,
know where we want to go.
and you look at the levels down here,
less worried. We might even want to
you can see that it's definitely not doing that. It's letting the levels go all the way up to -8, which is about 12 decibels past this level here. And the reason is because the attack time over here on the settings panel is too slow. But if I pull the attack time down to 0 and set it to peak mode, now it is going to do that.
We might even want to have a diet. We might even,
which is totally fine. But if I set it up like I did before, like this, and I make this kind of compression and expansion kind of shape where it's going to turn down the level down here, it's going to turn it up here and do a little bit of that compression with an attack time of 0 on the gain processor, it's going to sound a little bit chattery.
diet. We might even want to work out a little bit more.
Can you hear what happened right here to this breath noise?
We might even want to
It almost sounds like a fizz kind of sound effect. Let's listen right here.
worried. We might worried.
It's a little bit chattery. I'm going to turn up the fader here on the track so you can hear a little bit better.
Worried. We might.
It's kind of going, kind of like stuttering there when the expander part kicks in. So in order to get it to not do that, I have to increase the attack time on the gain processor. But when I do that, it basically barely compresses anything. So now this part should sound smoother.
Worried. We might even want to have a diet.
And it is doing that, but you can see that now it's clipping where it wasn't before because it's letting a lot of those more peaky audio bits through. And that's no good. So there's a couple of different ways that you can go about doing this. First, you can just make this an expander and have it be nice and smooth with a slow attack time. 26 milliseconds, totally fine.
Anxious, less worried.
And if I was doing this, I'd probably make this a little bit smoother. Something like this, maybe turn on spline curves here. I don't actually need all of these points here, but something like this would probably be fine. Oops, that's one too many points. Like that. Let's listen to this.
Worried. We might even want to have a diet. We might even want to work out a little bit more. But for all of us, it's this universal feeling of stuckness. So, Savannah.
So that's definitely working, but it's not really doing any compression and it's not boosting the level at all. So one thing you could do is just add another dynamics processor, but on this one, set the mode to peak and set the attack time to maybe 0 or so. And then you can draw a shape that looks like this, and it's actually going to do some compression. Let's hear that.
Trying to make changes. It's a universal theme. We know where we want to go, whether that's we want to be less anxious, less worried. We might even want to have a diet. We might even want to work out a little bit more. But for all of us, it's this universal feeling of stuckness.
And that's pretty much it. We have this compressor working nice and quickly, and we have this compressor working pretty slow, but that's because it's focused on this expansion down here. Now there is an effect in here called dynamics that does in fact have a compressor and an expander. However, this expander does not have attack and release times, and it does sound very chattery when it's doing more gain reduction. If it's set subtly, it's okay. But I like to use dynamics processor here for doing that kind of expansion. And actually what I normally do is something that looks like this. I'll take this compressor and make a shape that looks kind of like this, where we're doing a little bit of boosting of the level up here. And I know it's not going to do very much, if any, compression up here, but I'll throw a third-party effect called Fur Comp on, and this is a free effect. And this is a very, very clean compressor. It's one of the few compressors that you can run with an attack time of less than 1 millisecond that doesn't sound like a train wreck. It sounds very, very good with very low distortion. You should definitely check it out. And all I really do is pull the attack time pretty low, pull the threshold down, and set it from 0 latency to look ahead, which is FIRLA. That stands for look ahead.
Pandemic, trying to make changes. It's a universal theme. We know where we want to go, whether that's we want to be less anxious, less worried. We might even want to have a diet.
And the reason why I like this better than using 2 dynamics processors is because, honestly, I do not trust this dynamics processor to not make a clipping sound at some point, because I have heard it with very fast attack and release times make an undesirable kind of chattery clipping sound. So I think this is fine with more conservative attack and release times. But for something that you need to react really quickly to give you that kind of podcast radio sound, this comp is pretty spectacular at this. All right, coming up in the next lesson, you're going to learn about master bus effects. In this lesson, you are going to learn about using master bus audio effects. So when it comes to audio effects, I could talk for a really long time, but I'm going to try and give you just some really quick, useful, good advice for what you should do for every single project on your master bus. So your master bus is what all the audio gets routed to. By default, it's labeled as mix, and all of your tracks, dialogue, music, sound effects, whatever you have, gets routed through this one master bus before it gets rendered out. And so what I like to put in this master bus is at least 2 things. One is something to protect the levels so that they don't clip and that they don't do something called intersample peak clipping. And 2, use another effect to keep an eye on the loudness of my project. Now, to do that, I'm going to click on the last effects slot in the audio track mixer on the mix bus and come down here to special and then choose loudness meter. Loudness meter is a newer effect that lets you keep an eye on the loudness. I used to use loudness radar, but these days I use loudness meter. And it's got some presets here for things like Apple Podcast, Netflix, Spotify, and YouTube. And it lets you know some loudness information, things like the true peak level, which should never really go above -1, the integrated loudness, which for different platforms should be somewhere around, let's say, like -18 to -15, and it gives you some other information about loudness. It's got a settings page here, so it looks like Premiere is recommending a target loudness for YouTube around -14. I think that's pretty close. I've seen -15, but -14 is fine. And if I play the beginning of this, you're going to see it's going to show us all kinds of information about the loudness of this project.
Welcome to the Why Gotta Why podcast. I am hosting alone. My name is Peter Englert. I'm here with our producer, Dave Bode. We have a special guest today, all the way from Portland, Oregon. It's Savon Penn. Savon is a counselor and a life coach.
So things are looking pretty good. If this was going to YouTube, the level might be just a hair low, but I would not be too worried about it. YouTube does some leveling of the audio, and so it may turn this up by like 1 decibel, which is not a big deal. But the reason that it's handy to use this sort of effect is that if your audio had an integrated loudness that was way lower, like -20, I wouldn't leave the gap between -20 and where YouTube wants it at around -15 or -14 up to YouTube. I would want to be the one to control that so that I know what it sounded like. Because believe it or not, these different algorithms that Spotify, YouTube, Tidal, etc. use don't all work the same, and some of them don't sound all that hot. But if you give them something that is at an appropriate loudness, they're not going to do anything to the level, or they'll do so little to it that you can't audibly hear. So this is showing us that we're a tiny bit low for YouTube, but we're more or less in the zone. And that's because I did some work previously managing the levels by setting these 2 tracks here to the appropriate level using the essential sound. I basically just marked them as dialogue and went into loudness and then auto matched them and then applied this basic setup here with this S curve on the dynamics processor. And then I used fur comp. I'm not even doing any level makeup gain here, but I'm just kind of knocking down the peaks. And for this project, that is a pretty decent combination without using anything else. But I'm only 26 seconds in. So in addition to loudness meter, what I like to add is a limiter. Now Premiere does have a hard limiter, which you can apply. It's in the dynamics and compression setting here. And it's also got a multi-band compressor and a handful of other effects. I don't think that this is great, although if you don't want to get into third-party effects, this is probably okay to use. It does have a true peak mode, which is very handy. If you saw here, the true peak when I played this back before was around like -4, and you don't want your true peak to go above -1 because lossy audio formats, things like MP3 and most common AAC, do not handle peaks higher than -1 very gracefully, and they can get distorted and kind of nasty sounding. So you need something to be able to protect you from that. Now, it just so happened that without any limiting, the first 26 seconds of this, I was totally in the clear, which is great, but you don't want to count on that. So if you want to use one of the stock effects, pull up the hard limiter, set the max amplitude to -1, and I would leave all the rest of the settings at default. Honestly, I haven't used that effect a whole lot, and I would never use that because I have way better effects. One of them that I want to show you is a free effect, and that's called limiter number 6. And you can get this for Mac and PC, and it's free. It's totally awesome. It's a little old. There's a newer version of this that is much more advanced, but it does cost money. But the free version is still pretty awesome. Now, this can look a little bit complicated, but I'm going to show you how to do some basic settings here that will be totally fine for basically all your projects. The first thing that you want to look at is at the very end here, because all the defaults, if you did nothing else, are probably fine. But over here, you want to set this protection section right here to ISP. So you want to click this toggle twice, and the ceiling is already set to -1. Anywhere from -1 to -1.5 is totally fine. You don't want to set it higher than that because this is what's going to do that true peak limiting. Technically, it's ISP limiting, which is intersample peak, but you don't really need to know too much about that. Just set it to ISP precise with a ceiling of -1, and you're good to go. You can, for the most part, completely ignore this whole section right here. For video stuff, this is mostly overkill. These 2 sections here are basically just compressors. This is kind of a slow compressor, more of a leveling compressor. And this is a compressor that focuses on peaks and will be very handy to knock down peaks before they get to this protection section at the end, which you do not want to see have a whole lot of activity in it. So if I just play the beginning again, watch what's going to happen here. And I basically only set one thing on here, and that was I toggled this button here up to ISP precise.
Welcome to the Why Gotta Why podcast. I am hosting alone. My name is Peter Englert. I'm here with our producer, Dave Bode. We have a special guest today, all the way from Portland, Oregon. It's Savan Penn.
There we go. You can see that my true peak level, I think, rose by maybe 0.3. My integrated loudness really didn't change all that much, but now I have this nice limiter here that's going to protect me in case I wasn't so good at, setting up all these levels here. Plus, I have a whole 50 more minutes of jazz going on here. So these are pretty good default settings. The only thing that I normally change are in the peak limiter here. I set this to C, which I believe is the fastest reacting type of peak limiter. And I set the threshold up anywhere from -1 to -3. This is going to be content dependent. So one setting is not going to work for every project. You're going to have to tweak this a little bit for best results, but anywhere in here is fine. And then I usually pull the threshold down a touch and increase the attack time here on the compressor just to make it not react so much. I also change the oversampling mode from 1x up here to 4x. This can help with aliasing and hopefully decrease distortion. And that's pretty much it. Now there's many more effects that you could add. One that I sometimes will add is a multi-band compressor. And this is if I'm hearing some frequencies pop out every once in a while. You can apply this. Usually I just set this to classical master and then set the attack times to 5 and the release to 10. And then disable this limiter here. And that is a pretty general and pretty conservative setting. Although for this project, I don't really need that. But another thing that I like to do sometimes is add fur comp to the slot right above limiter number 6. And the reason is that sometimes it's handy to have a really fast, super clean compressor handle some of the peaks before they hit this limiter here, because this does have a peak limiter here, but this can be handy for just knocking down really small peaks. And I mean really, really small peaks. Normally I would set the threshold up to like anywhere from maybe -5 to -3, set the release time pretty fast and the attack time pretty fast. Set this to look ahead. Let's see if it's going to do anything.
Welcome to the Why Gotta Why podcast. I am hosting alone. My name is Peter Englert. I'm here with our producer, Dave Bode. We have a special guest today, all the way from Portland, Oregon.
It's going to do a very little bit for this particular project, but on another project, it may do a little bit more. And that's pretty much it. There are a lot of other effects that you could add here, things like EQ, dynamic EQ, other types of compressors. But if you use one thing only, well, let's say if you use two things only, use loudness meter so you can keep track of your loudness for your project. So if I wanted to really quickly get this to YouTube levels, I would target this by clicking this button right here, open up limiter number 6, and just turn up the gain by a little bit on the compressor and the peak limiter, and that's it. And now if I play this one more time, we should see this much closer to -14. Actually, I'm going to reset this and then play it.
Welcome to the Why Gotta Why podcast. I am hosting alone. My name is Peter Englert. I'm here with our producer, Dave Bode. We have a special guest today, all the way from Portland, Oregon. It's Savan Penn. Savan is a counselor and a life coach. He also is a blogger and an author. And we're really focusing our conversation today on why am I so stuck? So we think about the past year in the pandemic, trying to make change.
So that looks really, really good to me. Normally I don't try to get it quite this loud, but let's say that you did want to get it to -14. It does not need to read -14 for the entire time. This is basically an average of everything that I have played since I reset it. So this is totally appropriate. And you can see with this one effect here, which by the way, it's free, I can really easily manage my levels. In fact, if I didn't do anything or I did a lot less over here, I'm just going to take off the fur comp instance that I had over here and I play the beginning. You're not going to see a whole lot change here because this compressor and this limiter and this other fur comp here is going to catch a lot of the extra peakiness, and we should be in pretty good shape.
Welcome to the Why Gotta Why podcast. I am hosting alone. My name is Peter Englert. I'm here with our producer, Dave Bode. We have a special guest today, all the way from Portland, Oregon. It's Savan Penn. Savan is a counselor and a life coach. He also is a blogger and an author. And we're really focusing our conversation today on why am I so stuck. So we think about the past year.
So we're really close. I'm within 3/4 of 1 decibel. And if I just turn this down just a little bit, I'd be right there. But even though this number is within 1 decibel of what it was before, it does not sound the same. It's not nearly as smooth. So that's why I think this lesson is important. The previous lesson is important about using compressors. And this audio stuff, it does matter and it can make a big difference. Coming up in the next lesson, I'm going to show you a really easy way to normalize your loudness for your entire project with 1 click. Is it going to sound the same as doing some work to manage your levels? No, but it's really easy to do. So check that out coming up next. In this lesson, you will learn how to do loudness normalization on export. So for this lesson, I have set up a little example and a little comparison. Premiere has a great feature where you can do some loudness normalization when you export your project. Let me show you that right now. If you hit Control-M on the keyboard and bring up the export settings, any format that has audio should have in the Effects tab the option to do loudness normalization. And if you check this, you have a bunch of options here that you can set to manage the loudness of your project. Now, the first 2, and I believe the default is going to be ATSC, which is a broadcast standard, and the same thing for EBU, that's also a broadcast standard. I believe this is the North American broadcast standard, and this is the European broadcast standard. Both of those are completely irrelevant for anything that you're going to do on the web. So what you want to choose is ITU BS 1770-3. And this will allow you to set your target loudness. So for example, if you wanted to do the YouTube target loudness, which is fairly loud, of -14 loudness units full scale, you can type that in there. And then this is going to adjust the amplitude as your project goes along so that the end result is somewhere in the neighborhood of -14. Now, I say neighborhood because there is a tolerance setting here. And what this does is if your project's loudness is already within the tolerance range of the target loudness, right? So if it's 2 loudness units away from -14, it's not going to be altered at all. And you can adjust that if you need to nail -14. You probably want to bring that down to like 0.5 decibel or so. I'm going to leave it at 2 for now. You can set your max true peak level. The default is -2. -1 should work for just about every major web platform out there. And I also configured the true peak limiter here. The default values are 12 milliseconds and 200 milliseconds. This doesn't turn on and off the true peak limiter. This just configures the settings. So the default values are probably fine. I just set a little faster look ahead and a little faster release time for that. And you also have the option to write a loudness report. If you want to see exactly how loud your project was, you can check this box and it will write an XML file. You can also specify exactly where you want that report to be located. So what I did for this example to show you the difference between setting up some compressors here and using master bus effects is I duplicated my sequence. And over in the audio track mixer, I took off both of the compressors that I had on Pete's channel, both of the compressors that I had on Sovan's channel, and the 2 compressors that I had on the master bus. I basically took off all of the dynamics processing on all of the channels. And the only thing that I left was this effect right here, which technically is a dynamics processor. But if you want to find out more information on this, make sure to check out Dan Warhol's great explainer video that he did for Tokyo Dawn Records on their YouTube channel. You can just Google Tokyo Dawn Nova and you'll find it. This effect is a combination equalizer and dynamic equalizer, as well as a wideband compressor. And you don't really have to understand exactly what that does, but just know that this is doing some general tone shaping. So you can think of this more or less as a really fancy EQ. And so I'm EQing Pete's voice and I'm EQing Sovan's voice, and I'm also doing some denoising. But this processing right here is exactly the same as the processing over here. And I exported both of these. So we're going to look at one audio file that has processing with no loudness normalization. So I am in control of the loudness normalization through my master bus effects, through these processors right here. And the only thing that I changed here is I took off all the compressors. Everything else with the keyframes and the levels of the individual audio files are exactly the same. But I let Premiere handle the loudness. And I exported 2 minutes of each project, and then I open them up in Audition. And what this allows me to do is take a look at the waveform. It allows me to play them back and kind of A/B them. And it also allows me to look at the amplitude statistics. So amplitude statistics measures a bunch of things in Audition, but the main thing that I want to draw your attention to right here is the loudness. And if I scan this, it says that the version that I processed has a loudness of negative 15.05. If I jump over to the version that Premiere processed, and I just do another scan here of the entire file, it's negative 15.08. For all intents and purposes, that's exactly the same. Now, I didn't set out to make it exactly the same loudness. It just sort of ended up that way, which I think will make for a nice comparison. You can see up here the true peak level is -1. And in the one that I processed, it's also -1. So it's basically the same, except if you look at the waveform, it's definitely not the same. In the version that I processed, there's not as many waveform blobs, as I like to call them, that are going up to -1. You can see that the scale is kind of logarithmic here as the amplitude goes down. So the top half of this actually encompasses only the top 6 decibels of the audio range. But if you compare that to this version, you can see a lot more of these little spikes here are slamming into that -1 limiter. So in general, what you can see is that this file has a lot more kind of upper peaky bits, and the lower peaky bits or waveform blobs just look maybe a hair smaller. And on this version, there are less spikes, and really the difference here is just a couple of decibels. But these middle bits here seem to be just a little bit fatter, which means this should sound a little bit more consistent compared to the other mix. Now I'm going to play the beginning of both of these for you, and you can draw your own conclusion.
Welcome to the Why Gotta Why podcast. I am hosting alone. My name is Peter Englert. I'm here with our producer, Dave Bode. We have a special guest today, all the way from Portland, Oregon. It's Savon Penn. Savon is a counselor and a life coach. He also is a blogger and an author. Welcome to the Why Gotta Why podcast. I am hosting alone. My name is Peter Englert. I'm here with our producer, Dave Bode. We have a special guest today, all the way from Portland, Oregon. It's Savon Penn. Savon is a counselor and a life coach. He also is a blogger and an author.
My honest conclusion is that the version that Premiere did the loudness normalization to actually sounds pretty good. It's not bad. I think I could recommend it for folks who maybe don't have a ton of time to make sure that their projects are hitting the appropriate levels. Now, that doesn't mean that you should not do channel processing and you shouldn't do a little bit of compression on your channels and do some master bus effects, especially a limiter. But when I took all of those off, this really doesn't sound that bad. But there are a few things to take note. One, the beginning of this is way louder. The music intro here, this sounds much more like it is, well, like it should be. And the loudness is negative 16.7. And then if I scan this one, you can clearly see the wave is bigger and it's a good bit louder by around 5 decibels or so. And that is pretty significant. I could hear that right away. So it seems like the Premiere's loudness algorithm came in a little bit strong And then the rest of this kind of tapered down so that the overall average was negative 14. And in fact, if I just scan the back half of this, so this is where Sauvon starts speaking, this is going to come in at negative 18.4. And if I do the same on my version, so the back half of this, and I scan this, negative 16.23. Between negative 18.4 and 16.2 is only about 2.2 decibels. That's right on the edge of what you might be able to hear. But the point is to show you that doing a little bit of processing makes your entire mix a good bit more consistent. So using Premiere's loudness normalization is probably best done when you do a little bit of processing here in the audio track mixer. However, even if you don't do hardly anything with compressors, it still sounds okay. So it's definitely a tool that you should keep in mind for your projects, but I would recommend at least putting loudness meter on your master bus so that you can keep an eye on your loudness, and then using something like limiter number 6, or this is the paid version, the gentleman's edition of limiter number 6, which is essentially the same thing. It's just a little fancier, but putting something like this on your master bus to manage the levels just a little bit. And what I've showed you so far is really only scratching the surface of audio processing, audio mixing, and effects. Make sure to subscribe to the Envato YouTube channel for more great content on audio and video processing and more. Well, that about wraps it up for this lesson. Make sure to check out the next section where you will learn about edit enhancers. In this lesson, you will learn about using multiple monitors in Premiere. So welcome to my office / edit suite / creative safe space. As you can see behind me, I have a pretty modest display set up for my monitors. I have my main monitor here, and then I have 2 additional monitors up here, and all 3 of those are connected to the same workstation. I have another laptop over here, which you see is displaying the same thing as my program monitor, and I'm going to get back to that in just a minute. But let's talk about why using multiple monitors in Premiere will make you faster. For me, over the years, I have found that using at least one extra monitor allows me to have options. I can spread my interface out over multiple monitors. You can see on one of my monitors over here, I have some scopes. I have the waveform monitor, the vector scope, and I have a Lumetri color panel over here. Sometimes I like to put my audio track mixer and some essential sound tools over here, or maybe I like to just double click on some of the plugins that I'm using in the audio track mixer so that I can float them and monitor multiple plugin instances in another window and not kind of clogging up my main workspace over here. I like to have my main monitor pretty clear of excess panels. And so having one additional monitor allows me to spread some things out. If I'm working on color, if I'm working on audio, I like to have some tools on another monitor so I can have a big fat timeline, because a lot of times I have a lot of elements. So I like to have a little bit of height, and I definitely like to have my timeline pretty wide. So that's one aspect. We can spread some of the tools out in Premiere, and you can save your workspaces for a single screen and multiple screens, and that's very cool. Another reason is for communicating with other people. If you're like me, I work with other people a lot. Sometimes it's just communicating with an art director or somebody else involved in the project, and I may send them a version of the video and they'll have some notes. So what I like to do is have those notes open on another monitor and be able to reference what's actually happening in my edit at the same time. I really don't like to flip back and forth between full screen applications. If I have Premiere open on a single screen, even if it's a big screen, I have to minimize that or swap back and forth between full screen apps, and I find that really annoying. It's distracting and it kind of breaks my flow. So I oftentimes will have a web browser over here with my email, with Basecamp, and all of my notes and documents. And then I can have a full screen Premiere instance open, and that helps me to work faster. In addition to those ideas for using multiple monitors, you can also use a second or third monitor for full screen playback of your program monitor. Basically, whatever you are playing in Premiere will show up full screen on another monitor. And this is really easy to do. If you go into Edit, Preferences, as long as you have Mercury Transit enabled, you will see an option, if you have an additional monitor, for selecting that monitor to use for full screen playback. And when you do, you will see that your program monitor now shows up full screen without any interface, and that is really handy. Because when it's bigger, you'll be able to see details that you weren't able to see when it's smaller here in the program window. Because I'm guessing if you're like me, a lot of times you edit in a workspace that looks something like this, with a smaller program monitor. And that's fine for editing content and putting things together, but when you want to look at the details of the color, or maybe you've made some selections with Lumetri color, using some masks or whatever, it's really handy to see that on a bigger display. So definitely check that out. Now, maybe you're in a situation where you only have one extra monitor available and you want that full screen video option as well. Well, there is one other way, and it's a little bit more technical to get that for you. As you see over here, like I referenced in the beginning of the video, I have a laptop running the video from Premiere. Now, this is a completely separate system. This is not a display that's connected to my main workstation. If I hit play in Premiere, you can see that it'll play over here. Now, there is a little bit of delay, and I'm sure you saw that, which for me is not a huge deal. This is not something that I use all the time, but I wanted to show it to you because it gives you a few options. How this is working is with a technology called NDI. NDI is a video networking technology that allows you to put very high quality video over on your local network and then be picked up by other devices. They can be dedicated hardware devices. They can be just another machine here. It works on Mac, PC, and Linux. And this allows you to have a display either close to your main workstation or very, very far away, because it'll work wirelessly and it'll probably work better wired, but you can have a very long network infrastructure and put the NDI video from Premiere on the network and have someone else in another part of the building very, very far away monitoring that. So that definitely opens up some options. Now, I'm not 100% sure that Premiere comes with the NDI option available. If you go to Edit, Preferences, if you see that NDI option there, you're all set. If you don't see that, you're going to have to go to ndi.tv and download a little installer for NDI Tools. NDI Tools comes with a bunch of really handy tools, and one of those is the plugin for Premiere and After Effects. Once that is installed, you should definitely see it in Premiere, and then you can experiment with NDI. Now, so far, I haven't been able to get this NDI Premiere program monitor set up to work with audio. I can get the picture to work, and that's very easy. And there are options for NDI playback in the Premiere Pro preferences. However, I can't see any way to actually make it work. I select it for audio playback, but it just doesn't work. Now, they may fix that in the future. They're always working on something at Adobe, but the audio portion doesn't really work at the moment, at least for me. Your mileage may vary. So that about wraps it up for this lesson. Using multiple monitors with Premiere, or really any creative application, will definitely help you to work faster. All right, coming up in the next lesson, you are going to learn about third-party video effects. In this lesson, you're going to learn about some third-party video effects for Premiere Pro. So Premiere comes with a bunch of stock effects. If I expand the effects panel here by hitting the tilde key on the keyboard, and I drill down in the video effects, you can see we have things for adjustments, blurs, and sharpening. We have some color correction, some distortion effects, some generators, some perspective, noise, and grain. A lot of basics are covered with these stock effects. And you can even combine a lot of these stock effects to get things that are really pretty great looking, with some adjustment layers and maybe even some very rudimentary keyframe animation of some of the effect parameters. But sometimes this just doesn't cut it. and it's faster and easier to use third-party effects. So I want to show you just a handful that I personally have used over the years in Premiere. Now, for a more detailed list of the plugins that are available, you can check out this plugin page on the Premiere Pro help site on adobe.com. And this lists a bunch of third-party video effects right here. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good, but you can check those out and see what is available. Now, a product that I have actually used, I wouldn't say frequently, but more than any other third-party video effect over the years, is a product called Universe. Formerly, it was called Red Giant Universe. Red Giant has been acquired by Maxon, the makers of Cinema 4D. And Universe is a collection of 89 GPU-accelerated video effects and transitions. Now, I'm actually going to hop over to the Maxon site to show you these because it's a little bit quicker and faster to show you on their webpage. So this is maxon.net, and this gives you a nice little preview of a bunch of these effects. So some of their top effects, I think, are kind of listed at the top here. Chromatic aberration is a great kind of distortion effect where it distorts the outer parts of the image, kind of like a vignette, and then applies some color shifting to that. It's a very slick looking effect. They have all kinds of VHS or stylization type effects here. You can see, you can make it look like old-timey footage that was recorded on a VHS player. I think these are very strong as well. There's some nice glitch effects that they do as well. Some of them are a little bit, well, glitchy. You can control that to some extent in the effect, but you can see some really nice distortions and breakups here. Very cool. Glows are another area where Universe, I think, really excels. There are a bunch of different glows. I think this is just the basic glow. Now, Premiere doesn't even come with a very good glow at all. In fact, I don't even think it has a glow. There's something called VR glow that I've never used, but other than that, there's not really a good way to apply some glow to footage. This glow looks pretty good. There is also this glimmer, which I think looks pretty nice, and there are a few other glows that I'll show you on the next page. There's a retrograde for adding this kind of old-timey film look. There's some typographic treatments that Universe comes with. There's a pretty cool reframe effect in here, which does this picture-in-picture and sort of perspective distortion effect. It's something that you could do in After Effects pretty easily, but in Premiere, keyframe animation is just more times than not, it's more trouble than it's worth. So this is a pretty cool effect if you need something like that. I'll show you just a couple other effects that I think are pretty nice looking. They have some type-on effects that are okay, a camera shake effect, which is okay, some glitch transitions, which are pretty cool. There's some nice 16mm film grain, although this is something that you could just get from, let's say, Envato Elements and get some stock footage of film grain. A lot of times that's actually easier to use and it plays back faster in Premiere. There's a nice edge glow, a shrink ray effect, which has kind of a fake tilt shift. That's pretty cool. Prismatic displacement. I'm not sure this is something that you'd ever use in Premiere, but maybe. Misfire gives a kind of a really garbage looking film kind of look with all these blotches and scratches in your film. Here's another glow effect that I think is pretty cool. It's called Glow-Fi 2. I mean, you can just see on the preview here. That looks pretty dope. Overlight gives kind of a light leak sort of look. That's pretty good. But again, this is something that you could do with stock footage. And so you can see there's a collection of some useful stuff and some things that you or I would not find very much use in. Now, Universe is a subscription-based product. It's 200 United States dollarettes per year. Now, you may be thinking that is a lot of money for this collection of effects, or you may be thinking, wow, that's a really good deal. It really depends on your personal needs. This is something that I own and have owned for a few years, but honestly, I've not used it so much in the last year, so I have not renewed my subscription. It's going to run out in a month or so. But I just wanted to show you because for some folks, these stylized effects here are going to be absolutely critical for the projects that they're doing. So Red Giant Universe or Universe covers a ton of effects, and it's definitely worth checking out. Another effect that I want to show you is more of a utility, and that is called Neat Video. Neat Video is widely regarded as one of the best denoisers for video that you can get. Premiere doesn't have a stock denoising or degrain effect to clean up noisy footage. Now, cleaning up footage is not something that you need to do all of the time, and for some folks, they're never going to do it. But when you need to clean up footage, Neat Video is probably the tool that you are going to reach for because it is really, really good. So I just want to show you a little example of how Neat Video works on this clip right here. Now, I know the noise in this clip is going to be pretty hard to see, so I'm going to bump in here and go to 100%. This is an Ultra HD clip that was shot on a phone, the Google Pixel 4a 5G. It was on a gimbal, so this footage is reasonably smooth, but you can see there's quite a bit of noise here in the image. Now, some folks are bothered by the noise and some folks are not. Personally, I am not bothered by this noise at all. But if you wanted to take care of it, I want to show you how Neat Video works. So they have an effect called Reduce Noise, and this is the version 5. And this basically works on a clip-to-clip basis, meaning this is not an effect that you can apply to a bunch of footage, although I suppose you could, but you wouldn't want to, because you really sort of tune this per clip. Not every clip, even filmed in the same lighting and environment, is going to have the same level of noise based on its highlight and shadow detail, because you don't really see a lot of noise in the highlights, especially this clip, because the highlights are clipped. But even the brighter parts of the image don't display a lot of noise. You usually see it in the dark parts of the image where you can see this color noise creep in. So Neat Video works by selecting an area of rather low detail that has a good amount of noise in it, and then you build a noise profile. Then you can go over to this Adjust and Preview tab and dial in the noise reduction in a very, very detailed and complex way, although it doesn't have to be complex. A lot of times I will just select an area of noise, come over here and look at it and go, yeah, that looks good enough, and then click Apply. There are a ton of tools in here to tweak the temporal, spatial, and general performance and noise reduction that is going on in here. And there are some handy, helpful tips like this noise check and local filter check and repeated frames check that will kind of guide you in the process. And there are some tool tips that you can use that will also help you to tune this if you're having trouble getting the right amount of noise reduction. Now, in terms of how this actually looks, if you go kind of back and forth, I think the initial impression, both for me and I think most folks who look at this, are going to say, okay, so it has reduced the noise, but it's also made the footage look a little bit softer. And it has a little bit, but if you really look at some of the details here in like the hair right here, you can see if we go from the before and after, it hasn't really crushed out details. It's just softened some areas a little bit more than they were before. The reality is the original footage here is not that sharp to begin with. Like I said, you can get in there and tweak things really, really specifically, but you don't necessarily have to. I didn't tweak anything. I just selected some noise and then hit Apply. And if you look, it's done a great job of cleaning up the noise here. Now, the only negative to kind of this advanced noise reduction is that this will not play back. I have a very fast workstation that I'm recording and showing this to you on, and even on my computer, this won't play back in real time. It'll play a couple of frames and then freeze up. So this noise reduction pass is really best, I have found, to do kind of when you're mostly done with your edit, because you're not really going to be able to work on this. You'd have to basically mute all of the effects in your project in order to get playback once you've applied Neat Video. You can try or buy Neat Video over at neatvideo.com. For Premiere, it's $75 United States dollars. If you want a bundle for After Effects and Premiere, it's you can get kind of a bundle deal here, or if you have other products that you want to get Neat Video for, you can check that out over at neatvideo.com. That's it for this lesson. Coming up next, you're going to learn about motion graphics templates. In this lesson, you're going to learn about MOGRTS in Premiere. A MOGRT is a motion graphic template. And if you have not been using these, or if you've not heard of MOGRTS, this is going to be really exciting for you because they are a way to get really complex looking or fantastic looking titles and transitions into your project without having to know anything about animating or After Effects. And I want to show you just a few. So to get started, you're probably going to want to come up here to Window and then pull up the Essential Graphics panel. I already have it loaded over here. And then in the Browse tab, you're going to see a collection of various templates. Now, you're not going to have the same set that I do. I have a collection of third-party MOGRTS as well as some stock Adobe ones, which I never use. I think these ones are some stock ones. I think they're pretty terrible looking, but they may work for you. But most of these are made up of motion graphics templates or MOGRTS that I downloaded from Envato Elements. I have some transitions, titles, and I want to show you how they work. So let's take a look at a really simple one that I use all the time. I think this is called Smart Title Pack. So I'm just going to drag it into my project here. This has been made for 4K. And right now my sequence is just 1080. So I'm going to set the scale to 50%. And you may be thinking, I don't like these slanty type titles. I don't like these slanty type titles very much either, or actually it's skewed, not exactly slanted, which is that. I like them just kind of straight ahead and simple for most of my work. You can see over here in the Edit tab, I just made those adjustments while I was explaining it. It's very, very easy. And this is the template side of the motion graphic template. You don't need to know about how this animates in, and it does animate in. It's got this really nice, what I would consider a simple animation. It animates in and then it animates out. But you can change a bunch of things about this to suit your needs. Maybe you don't need a 3-line title for your project. No worries, we'll just delete the text there and that completely disappears. We can change this to something like Motocross X Factor. That could be the name of our show or something. I don't exactly know. You can change the size of this, the tracking. Maybe we don't want it so wide. We can change all of the color. So let's do a different color. Let's pick I don't know, black. That's not very creative. Pink. I like pink. Pink will work. Yes. That's very cool. You can just basically look here. I don't have to explain all this stuff to you. It's pretty self-explanatory. Tracking, middle fill on and off, bottom tracking. We can change the font style. We can change all of these options here for full bold, full italic, all caps, small caps. And for this particular one, you can change the slant and the skew. And maybe this is not in the right spot. Maybe you wanted to use this as a lower third. Well, you can just move it to wherever you want. I could scale it down even more. And I could use this as a traditional lower third with like a name and a title sort of thing. For me, this is the sort of thing that works for a lot of different projects. I work on a lot of corporate things that are, maybe not so flashy. And so titles like this really work for me. But there's certainly a lot more what you might consider creative stuff, and I wanted to show you a few of those as well. I found this great pack here that has a bunch of these brush elements in them. This is also kind of a 4K scaled thing here, so I'm just going to scale that down a little bit. You can see over here, you don't like red? No problem. Let's change that to blue. Boom! Nailed it. We can change the text. Again, all of the font properties we can change. We can change position. Now, some of these get pretty wild with position because this is set for a 4K comp. You can see that we can change the position either positive 3840 or negative 3840, which is probably way too much. If you double click on any of these properties, they go back to the default, which is very, very handy because sometimes they can get like out of control. You might wing this one place and then you're like, where to go? And then you're trying to get it right back to where it's supposed to be. Well, you just double click it and things will go back to their default positions. This has a nice little animation on, and I think this does animate off. And you can see for this one, this is too long. I mean, maybe it will work for you, but for me, this is too long. I can just grab the rate stretch tool by pressing R on the keyboard and then just scooch this down, and then it just kind of flies on. I actually like the way this looks better, and I think that works pretty well. The nice thing about this is that I think it looks better to have something that's a little bit slower and then to be able to shrink it down or speed it up rather than the other way around. If you have this short, slowing it down may not look that great. But if you go the other direction, I think it does. So that's another one that I think is pretty cool. Okay, this one I think is very interesting. This is another kind of 4K one. Everything's 4K these days. But you'll see that this one takes a second to load in. I'm just going to set it to 50%. And then I'm going to play. And this brings up another very important thing that I want to talk about. These motion graphics templates, or MOGRTS, are running in After Effects in the background. Even though you don't see After Effects running, it's running in the After Effects engine in the background. And so some of these, like you saw here when I chucked this into the timeline, it didn't show up for a couple of seconds. And that's because this one is quite a bit more complicated than the first two that I just showed you here. And it will play, but it did take a few seconds for this to kind of load in. I also have this set to half resolution playback. If I set this to full resolution on my system, it's probably not going to play back in real time. It may chug. Yeah, it chugged. And I have a pretty fast computer. This is a 16-core machine with 128 gigs of RAM and a pretty decent video card. And it's still not going to play this back. So if you're on a laptop, if you're on a lower powered machine, you may have to clock this down to like half resolution to get this to play at all. This one is all being driven by shape layers, and you can change the color of all of these shape layers to like whatever you want. We can really get in here and customize, and you can do the same thing for the text. But I just wanted to point that out is that not all of these motion graphics templates are going to play back super smooth on your system, but that's the trade-off for this more complex looking graphic here. There's a couple different workarounds you can do to this. Like if you got this title just right, you could nest this and then render it out. It's something that you can do pretty easily. For example, you can just nest this, chuck it in a nest, and now this is just a video layer. So I could go in here to my nest and I could just render this out. I'd hit Control M on the keyboard and I'd bring up the export settings, set this to QuickTime, and you'd want to pick a preset with an alpha channel. I usually use GoPro Cineform 12-bit with alpha, and then you render that out. When it's rendered out, it'll just be an alpha channeled video. You can bring it back in and it will play like butter. If butter was a thing that you could play, which you can't, but I think you understand what I'm saying. It'll play back very smooth once it's been rendered out. And sometimes you have to do that because it's too painful to work with some of these more complex motion graphics templates. But they're not all that way. Some of them are pretty simple, especially when it comes to these more simple titles like this, which I think is another very cool title that I just found on Envato Elements. I like this because it's a big title. It takes up, well, not half of the screen, but a good portion of the screen. And this, just like the other ones, has a bunch of customization that you can do. I mean, you can see this is a big long list of things here. We can change the box width. We can change the box opacity. We can change these colors here. Maybe we want like a nice deep red there. That looks fantastic. I mean, like, I really like that. That's not a dramatized statement. I think this looks pretty awesome. Now, not all of the motion graphics templates are titles. Some of them are transitions. And a type of transition that I really like is a light leak or kind of a lens flare thing. And this is another transition that I got on Envato Elements. These are 4K light leak transitions, I believe this is called. And if I set this to 50%, you can kind of see what's going on here. And you may be thinking, well, that's just a piece of footage that's playing. And you're not wrong if you came to that conclusion, because this sort of lens flare is not something that's being generated or animated in After Effects necessarily. It's probably a recorded piece of footage. However, the nice thing about having it as a MOGRT is, number one, you don't have to keep importing them into your project every time, but two, it comes with all these preset customization options in the Edit tab here to make this work however you want. We can do some flips. We can change the hue of this without having to apply any effects. Now, the effects are already applied in After Effects. I mean, that's how this works, but it sure is handy to just throw one of these things on there and then you're like, well, I don't really like the colors of this. Maybe I want to give it a little tint, and you change things around super, super fast. And to actually use this, I'd probably throw this in either screen mode, and then I would take this part right here and line that up right at the transition point, something like this. And now I have a nice lens flare type transition. Anyway, a bunch of great transitions, graphic elements, and titles are available for MOGRTS. And to add these MOGRTS, what you want to do is come up here to the flyout menu in the Essential Graphics panel, choose Manage Additional Folders. And from here, you want to point Premiere to the folder where the MOGRTS actually live. You can also remove them here, and that will get them out of your project. But let's say we want to add one in. You can see here I have a pack. It's called Liquid Transition Pack Premiere Pro MOGRT. If I click Select Folder and then I choose OK, it's going to look like it refreshed over here, but those liquid transitions are not in here. And I want to show you that over here. That's because in this folder, this Liquid Transition Pack Premiere Pro MOGRT, there are no MOGRTs. They're actually inside this Elements folder. So that's the one trick with these, is you have to point Premiere to where the MOGRTs actually are stored. So if I click this Elements folder here and then select Folder, and I click OK, now it's going to update and I should see my liquid transitions. There they are, right at the bottom. Well, that wraps it up for this lesson. Coming up in the next lesson, you're going to learn about post-production camera moves. In this lesson, you're going to learn about post-production camera moves. All right, let's get one thing out of the way right off the bat. Number one, these are not really camera moves. I know it says in the title, and the effect that I'm going to show you kind of looks like a camera move, but it's not really a camera move. But we are going to fake it to some degree, and this is a really handy trick to know. It can give your shots a little bit more movement when they don't have any. So for example, I'm going to unmute my audio here, and I'll play you the first couple seconds of this edit, of this motocross edit one more time. Check this out. It starts off okay. We have a nice shot kickstarting the bike here, revving it up, taking off, some dirt flying. I really like this shot. However, the first two, they don't really have as much energy as the rest, where basically every shot is moving. So let's say, for example, in this clip right here, I wanted to do a little push in on the foot. Well, what I would do is click on motion for this clip, and that will bring up the transform handles here and also the anchor point right here. And if I want this clip to scale from any place other than dead center in the clip, what I want to do is move this anchor point. So I wanted to get it to scale from up here, which is a lot more convenient than having it scale from the center and then also animating the position, which you could do if you wanted, but this will really save you some time if you do it this way. So I'm going to drop a scale keyframe. I'm going to pull that all the way to the beginning because I want this to start at 100%. And then I'm just going to scale up this clip a little bit. Yeah, probably not 120%, but maybe like 110%. This is not a high res clip. It's just 1080. So if you don't want things to look too soft, you probably shouldn't scale things up a ton past 100% if you are dealing with kind of just native resolution footage. This is a 1080p timeline, and this is 1080p footage. So, 110, 115, that's probably okay. And then I'll drag this keyframe almost to the end. Now, a little trick that I'll show you here is if you press down on the keyboard to go to the next edit point, and you do have to make sure that your video track is targeted for this to work, and then I'll press left. This is where you want to snap the keyframe to. You can snap the keyframe to the very end of the clip, and this is the out point of the clip, but that is essentially useless because if you want to put the CTI in the effects controls window right over your keyframe and make an adjustment, you can't, because if you go to that keyframe by clicking this button here, go to next keyframe, it goes to the next clip because that's where the keyframe actually is at the start of this frame. So it's kind of useless to put the keyframe right on the end there. You can put it right here and it's a lot easier to work with. So that's my trick. It's not magic, but you just press down and then the left arrow key. There you go. So that's where I want it to end. Let's see how this looks. Nice. Okay, it's not magic, but I think it gives it a little bit more energy. We could go maybe a little bit more here. Let's just bump it up. Throw caution to the wind. There we go. Okay. It's not bad. It's only for a second, so I think it's okay. We could do a similar thing here. I could do another push in here. I'm going to click on motion and make sure that my anchor point is over the glove here, because that's the focal point of this shot right here. And then I'm going to go to the end there and hit the left arrow, and I'll just push in here just a little bit. Yeah, something like that. Don't. Yes, I can feel that intensity. I don't know if you're feeling that from where you are sitting or standing or laying down, but I'm feeling that. That's looking pretty good. So that's just kind of basic stuff. If you've never thought to do that, well, now you have that in your skill set. You have that in your pocket to use, and that's really handy. A lot of times I'm working on footage for corporate pieces, and I'll have shots that are like slider or dolly shots, and it'll be like slider, 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 and then static shot. And this is what the client really likes. They like this particular shot, but there's not a moving version of it. So you can use this trick to help get you some movement. Another thing that you can do is you can just scale up the footage without animating the scale. So let's say we put this at, I don't know, 115%. And this will look a little bit better if you're working with like 4K footage or higher than whatever your timeline or your sequence is set to. And then you can do a bit of a pan. Now, you can do this by hand if you want. Let's set a position keyframe right here. Actually, let's just go back to the beginning. I'll click on motion. And if you hold control, you can actually just snap the footage right to the edge of the frame. It's kind of a handy thing you can do. And I'll go to this frame right here. I'm going to click on motion again, and then I'm just going to hold control while I pull this down to the top corner, and that'll just ensure that I don't accidentally move it just like 1 pixel inside, and then there's a little black line over here. That's not great looking. So now I have a nice little extra movement to this shot. Now it already had some of that movement, but I'm just making it a little bit nicer here by doing this position animation. And I think that looks a lot better. Gives the piece a lot more energy. One final tip I'm going to show you, and you may have seen it over here because I left it open. I've kind of given it away, but I want to show you a free preset that you can download from premierepro.net called Jarl's Deadpool Handheld Camera Presets. That is indeed a mouthful. But these presets created by Jarl were used on the movie Deadpool, and they are handheld shake presets, which are pretty cool. So let's say we take this shot right here, which is okay. We got guys jumping off the jump here, and that's all looking fantastic, but there's not much movement to it. So let's apply one of these cool presets here. Let's go for long lens, and let's check out what this looks like now. Whoa, check that out. That's some nice looking camera shake. I admit, I'm saying that honestly. That is not a dramatized statement. I really think that looks nice. Now, Jarl has some presets here for any footage. This is code for footage that is not high res or higher res than what you're working with, and then for oversized footage. And the difference is that the oversized footage presets do not scale up the footage. So you see that this scaled it up to 105% so that you don't see the footage like moving off of the frame, or you don't have any kind of black edges around. And it works fantastic. These are great presets. We can take any of these and give them a little bit more punch. Let's do one called More Movement. And this one is not made for oversized, but we can actually use it anyway. I'll just scale up the footage a little bit, and that'll be fine. So let's check this out. Hey, I like that. That looks pretty cool. And if it's not fitting quite right, you can maybe scale it up a little more and then adjust the anchor point. You're not going to be able to adjust the position because, as you can see, there's basically a keyframe on every frame, or pretty much. Actually, they don't line up with the frames, but it doesn't matter. You can't adjust the position because that's just going to insert a keyframe, and there's already a bunch of keyframes, so that's not really going to work. However, you can just adjust the anchor point, and that'll shift all of your footage in any direction that you want. So if I wanted this to kind of bias more towards the top of the frame, I would just make that adjustment here with the anchor point. and then just scale the footage up a little bit more so that it's not running off the edge. And then I get something like this. Boom. I like it. Or we can go even crazier with that shot. Let's just drop one called even more movement, or I guess it's lots of movement. That's what it's called. And I'm going to have to scale this up quite a bit and probably move this over just a little bit. Let's check out what that looks like. Nice. That's not bad. I probably want to really make sure this is at the edge of the frame here so that I get more of that action in there. Boom. Like that. But they're really great looking presets. They are free and they're super easy to install. You just download them. You can chuck them in any folder you want. You can just right click here in presets, go to import presets, and then wherever you have put Jarl's Deadpool camera shake presets, you can point Premiere there and then they will show up right inside Premiere. Very, very cool stuff. Make sure to check out the next lesson where you're going to learn about multi-box creative edits. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to create split screens and multi-box effects. Sometimes in editing, you need to show more than one thing happening at the same time. So let's say, for example, I'm scrubbing through the footage here, and I want to show this section, but I want to kind of split screen it so we can see the two things happening here at the same time. So what I'm going to do is put both of these on separate layers, and I'm going to extend out these clips so that they're both happening at the same time. And I want to move this one over to the left side a little bit. And I want to kind of reveal the bottom clip underneath that. Most of the time, what I do to do this is I will use a crop effect. Now, if I was in After Effects, I would be using a track matte. You can use track mattes in Premiere. However, I don't think they work very well for most applications. It's faster for me to just use a crop effect. If I want to get just a simple straight line down here, I'm going to use a crop effect. So to do that, I'm going to throw the crop effect on the clip and then I'm going to crop the right side. And if I want to do a dead center split here, what I'll do is maybe throw a guide up here. So I just enabled guides. And if you click and drag, I want this right at 960. Now, the current zoom level makes it nearly impossible to get 960, but if you come into 100% here, you can get that right at 960. If you select the crop effect, you can get this edge here. However, it's not going to want to snap right to the middle, but if you're zoomed in a pretty good amount, you can kind of move this over in small enough increments that you can line this right up with the center of the frame. If it's off by like a pixel, I really don't think anyone's going to know the difference. Now, this footage on the bottom here, we're going to need to modify a little bit. Probably the easiest way to do something like this, which is a little bit more complex, if this were two people talking, like two talking heads, this is pretty much all you need to do. You can take this footage and just slide it over and move this footage and have that be right in place and they're not going to move. With stuff like this, it becomes a little bit more complicated because the frames move. And so my dirt bike rider here, he goes out of the frame. That's not really going to work for me. So I think what I would probably do instead is take this footage here and nest it. We'll call this Ride Away. And then I'm going to take this footage here. I'm going to reset the transform. And then what I'm going to do is just animate this by hand to make sure my guy here, or woman, I don't really know who is riding. It's Jesse. Could be a man or a woman. Doesn't really make any difference. But I'm just going to push this person, this rider, over here with the position controls and make sure they're on that side of the screen. And it may look a little bit herky-jerky here. So I'm going to take this keyframe here and maybe give it a Bezier. There we go. That looks fantastic. Now in my nest, I'm going to reapply that crop and then just crop it to 50% because now I don't really have to worry about where exactly that is. I know that this nest is 1920 by 1080. If you didn't know that, You can just come up here to the nest sequence settings and just look. It is 1920 by 1080. And if I crop it by 50% on the right, it is in the exact right position. I can do the same thing with this clip here. It's probably the fastest way. We'll call this ride toward. And then I will do the same thing for this clip here. I'm going to drop a position keyframe here, and I'm just going to modify this so that it's in the exact right spot. I don't think I have to really modify this all that much. However, if I wanted to maybe scale this up a little bit, things are going to get pretty hinky. Because I maybe want this guy to fill the frame a little bit more towards the end of this clip. Yeah, I think that looks a little bit better. So I'll just delete those keyframes and redo it here just a little bit. Yeah, I think that looks better. I'm going to go to the end and make sure that I put this keyframe right in the last frame there. There we go. And I don't have to worry about cropping this at all. Very nice. I think that works fantastically. I'm going to get rid of my guides here. By the way, if I haven't said this before, all of these buttons here are completely customizable. You can click this button editor here, and then you can reposition any of these. You can just click and drag. You can add. You can see there's a bunch of buttons that I don't use. But I'll just go over really quickly, since I have you here, some of the buttons that I do use. There's the Add Marker button, Show Rulers, Global Effects Mute. This is really handy if you have some effects which are incredibly processor intensive that you throw on and you can't leave them on while you're kind of watching through, but you know you have them set right and you need to mute them, or there's some other issue where you need to globally mute all of the effects in the project. That's a cool button to have up there. There's the Show Guides button, then the standard buttons that are here by default, and then another one which you may not have is called Toggle Proxies. Anyway, all that to say, this is completely customizable, including you can put some space down here, like a little break between these sections, if you will. Well, that didn't really work, right? Let me try it right there. Click OK. There we go. And you can kind of break them apart a little bit if that's helpful for you. Now, if I wanted to add a little break here, a little visual graphic to break up these two frames, because maybe you don't like the way that this kind of looks similar, but it's not exactly the same. The colors don't quite match. Super easy to do over here in Essential Graphics. I already have the panel open. If I jump over to Edit, I can click on this new button here, and just off the screen is Rectangle. Let's create a new rectangle here. And I'll just size this up. Now, sizing this is a little bit kind of wonky because usually when you're making these sorts of things in like After Effects and some other programs, if you use a keyboard modifier while you're clicking and dragging like Alt or Control, it'll scale both sides. Like if I hold Alt, it should scale both sides in towards each other, but it doesn't. But that's no big deal. I could just make it as thin as I want and then grab the anchor point tool and hold Control, and I can snap that to the center if that was important to me. And then I can use this horizontal center here, and I'd probably change the color to something like white or maybe even pink. That's cool. There you go. And now I have a nice little break between those. Who am I kidding? I'm going to change this back to white because I do like the color pink. I just don't think it works here. You can also use the scale controls here, so I could make this skinnier with the scale like that. That also works. Really simple to do. And now I have a nice little split screen. And you can get way more complicated than this. Maybe you want to do some kind of a quad box, or maybe one over here and two over here. No problem. Let's do it live. Let me take my guy here, reset my scale, delete my position keyframes. I find this one of the worst features in Adobe Premiere. Why do I need a babysitter? I click the button. If I want to undo it, I'll just click undo. But every single time you make a keyframe and then you delete, it says, hey, are you sure you want to do that? I mean, you could really mess some stuff up. Okay, I get it. I get it. Thanks for that, friend. All right, so let's say I want to do a box like this. Okay, I already have a line there. I'm going to drag another guide right to the middle of the frame, which should be 1080 by 40. So let's get that close, 540, boom. And I'm going to position my rider right up there. Now this time I may have to do a little bit more to keep my rider in the frame, maybe towards the end of the frame. Yeah. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to reset my position. I'm going to grab motion here, get rid of my guides for a second, and snap the anchor point to the upper corner. And I think I can get away with just doing a scale. Yeah, I'm probably gonna have to do scale and position. So I'm gonna go over here like this, and then I'm going to position this over like this. And I think actually that's all I'll have to do. Get this, make sure this is on the last keyframe here, just like that. I think that'll keep my rider right here. I could bring them up in the middle here, like that. Probably want to set this to like a Bezier here so it doesn't look like it's ping-ponging all around. Let's see how that looks. Yes, that looks fine. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to come back to my graphic here, and I'm going to rename this to vert line. Very good. And I'm going to duplicate that. I'll rename this to horiz line, stands for horizontal. And then without messing with the scale of this, I'll just rotate this line 90 degrees and just push it over. I don't need to make sure anything lines up. It's just white on white, so it's going to be totally fine. I'm going to get rid of the guides now. And let's take this shot here and bring that out. And let me get rid of, I'll hold shift and just enable this down here and find out what we're working with. Okay, so I have jumping over here. Very good. I may be able to just kind of slot this in behind these other two shots, because at this point, I can take my guy right here. Remember, even though it's only showing me this bit right here, this nest is the entire frame. So I can put a crop effect on here. I can crop the left side by 50% and the bottom by 50%. And that's going to lock this person to this upper corner. I don't have to worry about positioning this at all. I can do that in the nest if I need to make any adjustments. But that's just a really easy way to get a nice corner shot there living up in the corner. And then for this shot right here, I'm going to just move this over and get that right down here. I'll probably scale this down. Maybe just line it up just like that. I think that'll work as long as it's pretty close to the middle. I have some coverage there with that line. There we go. All right. Let's turn on these other layers, holding shift and click. Very good. Let's see what we have here. Heck yeah, that looks great. I really like that. Let's see what it looks like with the music. I like it. So there you go. A really quick and simple way to do multi-boxes. You can do all kinds of combinations of multi-boxes, third splits, horizontal splits, whatever you want to do. It's pretty simple to do. You can use Essential Graphics to help break up the frame by creating some nice little white or various color frames. You can get as creative as you want and really add some more dimension to your edits. Coming up in the next lesson, you're going to learn how to add markers for really fast editing of music and video. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to use markers to create a rhythmical edit. If you've been following along in this course, you will have seen a few edits that I have put together that have footage that is timed to the music, like this motocross edit right here. I don't need to play the whole thing. You've seen it a few times by now, I'm sure. And I want to walk you through some different ideas that you can use to create these sort of rhythmical edits. Now, I understand that not everyone is a musician, and so this may be more of an abstract concept, but I'm going to kind of walk you through the process. I'm going to duplicate my sequence here. and just open this up. And I'm going to delete all of my footage here and kind of start fresh with just the audio. Now, even if you do have footage in your project, what you might want to do is to just toggle off all of the track outputs for your project so that Premiere doesn't slow down on any troublesome clip. I mean, let's be honest. Sometimes Premiere does that for what seems like no reason whatsoever. But turning off all of the outputs should help to clean things up so that you can very precisely get those markers to line up where you want them to. I would also disable all of the track targeting so that I don't accidentally have my clip selected here. Instead of creating sequence markers, I would have created clip markers if I have this selected. So without my audio clip selected, if I press M on the keyboard, that drops a marker. So the idea here is that you play back the music and you tap the M key at some sort of rhythmical interval to drop sequence markers. Let me show you. So I'm just going to tap one of my hands on my desk, and then every 4 beats, I'm going to hit the M key and drop a sequence marker. One, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. It's not bad. I kind of messed up the end there. Let me see if I undo the last 2. Let me see if I can get this a little bit better at the end. There we go. Okay, so the last bit might have been a little advanced. It may take you a few times through, but I think you get the idea here. In fact, I may drop maybe 1 or 2 more in the beginning here. Let me just listen through. One, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. There we go. I knew there was a little rhythmical hit coming up here because I've heard this song like, I don't know, 87 times by now. And I knew in this measure, there was this little thing. Bum, bum. So I just dropped 2 sequence markers there. There we go. Now I have a bunch of sequence markers in my project. And I can use that with my footage and automate to sequence really quickly. Check this out. Select all my footage, drag it to automate to sequence. I'm just going to go with the selection order. And I will change the placement to at unnumbered markers and then click OK. And actually, I want to go back to the beginning to do that. That was stupid. Let me try that one more time. There we go. Okay. A couple of them are not going to make it all the way because they have an in and an out point that is just a little too short to fill the gaps, but let's see what we have. Turn this on so we can actually see. All right, I think that's pretty good. Now, maybe doing all of that rhythmical tapping is too complicated for you. I admit for some folks it may be, because I accessed the inner drummer in me to pull off some of those more rhythmical taps. And that's okay. You know, not everyone has that skill set. That's totally fine. And for those of you who don't have that skill set, there is a product that you may be interested in called Beat Edit 2 for Premiere Pro. And I'll tell you right now, this little message is not sponsored by Beat Edit 2, but I think it's a really cool product for those of you who do this sort of thing. You're making, I don't know, Instagram supercuts, you know, a bunch of music and a bunch of footage or stills and graphics, and you want a tool to help you do it. This is the one. It is $99, but I'm going to give you a quick demo and you can decide for yourself if you think it's worth it. You should definitely check out the demo as well on aescripts.com, which is where you can find it. So I just launched this by going to Window, Extensions, Beat Edit. You can see I have 2 versions. This is the old version, which I do actually have a full license for. And this is the new one, Beat Edit 2. And I just have a trial license, but that's okay because it more or less works. Just gives me 15 seconds of markers, which is plenty for this demo. So I'm going to select my clip here in the timeline and then click Load Music. And you can see when I did, it got to work doing some beat analysis here. And then if I play this in the beat edit extension, you can hear it's created a little click at every single beat. And if I took this as it was right here and I just clicked the create markers and I had it set to sequence markers, it's going to drop a bunch of sequence markers in the project here, and they're all right on the beat. And this is way, way more accurate than you could do it by hand unless you were kind of a professional musician. It's also way faster than you could do even if you were a professional musician, because there's no way that I could do this faster than Beat Edit and its algorithm could do everything that I just did. Now that added a marker at every beat, which I don't think is ideal for this particular project. However, I can alter that by doing one beat every 4 beats. And then if I click Select, let me go back to 1 beat and let's try that one more time. And I think if I put the CTI in the extension right there, there we go. Now it's going to create 1 beat every 4 beats, which is exactly what I did the first pass. There we go. Now if I hit add markers, you can see for the first 15 seconds, because it is the trial, it's going to do exactly what I just did. But this gets even better. I'm going to delete those markers and show you something else that's even cooler. So you can have it add more beats by subdividing the beats like this. That's going to drop a ton. I don't really want that. I want it to do one every 4 beats, but I want it to do it here. But there's another option down here called add extra markers. And what this is going to do when the slider is set to musical is it's going to listen more or calculate with the algorithm and drop some more markers in a very musical way. Now, because this first couple of bars of the music has this kind of lo-fi, high-frequency roll-off thing, it's not going to be able to grab onto some of the musical rhythms that are happening in this section here. But you can see here, throughout the rest of the piece of music, check out what it's doing. Very, very cool stuff. So if I add these markers to the piece like that, I get some great markers in here. Let's just do another automate to sequence. Looks good. Whoops. Let me put the CTI back at the beginning and try that again. Cool. Let's check out what this edit looks like. Let me fix these few. There we go. All right, let's check this out. Obviously not the greatest cut of that first clip, but that's okay. Okay, if you're not impressed with that right there, I mean, let me just play this quick section right here again. Now I did select a pretty dope clip for this riser kind of sound effect in the background, but I mean, that was cool. How that all lined up was very cool. So, again, this is not a plug. I don't get anything if you get this extension for Premiere. They haven't paid me for this, but I just wanted to show it to you because I honestly think that this is a really excellent tool. Why don't I use it? Why haven't I purchased it? Because I went to college for music. So this is not something that I actually need. I'd prefer to spend my hard-earned dollars and cents on, effects and plugins and things of that nature. But for you, if you kind of struggle with lining things up in Premiere to the music or creating edits to music, that's probably the best tool that I have ever seen. Again, that was just the trial version, and there are definitely way more features to that extension. You should check that out over at aescripts.com. That's it for this lesson. Make sure to check out the next lesson for some more great tips and tricks. Thanks so much for watching this course. If you followed along, you will have hopefully learned several new ideas, techniques, and skills. Even though this course didn't cover a lot of the new and exciting features of Premiere Pro, what you did learn are solid techniques that you can put to use on almost every project. If you want to learn more about Premiere Pro, After Effects, Photoshop, Illustrator, and more, check out Envato Tuts Plus at tutsplus.com. And if you want to access millions of digital creative assets for one low price, check out Envato Elements. With Envato Elements, you get access to stock footage, motion graphics templates, music, photos, vector graphics, fonts, sound effects, After Effects templates, and so much more. A single subscription gives you access to everything that you will need to create great projects. See for yourself at elements.envato.com. Thanks again for watching this course. My name is Dave Bode for Envato, and I'll see you around.